Section 1 of Shadowland, November 1919. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by George Banfield. Shadowland, November 1919, by Various. A bird's eye view of the screen and stage. The Footlights. Most of the big British playwrights are coming over this year. W. Somerset Maugham was here, and John Drinkwater and C. Haddon Chambers have just arrived. Pinheiro and Barry are in the offing. Ina Clare becomes a star this season with the opening of the Belasco production of Avery Hopwood's The Gold Diggers at the Lyceum Theatre in New York. Broadway is just now undergoing an avalanche of melodramatic murder mystery plays. Already present are At 9:45, A Voice in the Dark, and The Crimson Alibi, and George M. Cohen will shortly offer The Acquittal. New York theatre tickets have advanced from $2 to $2.50 and $3. A. H. Woods is presenting Marjorie Rambeau in The Unknown Woman. Winchell Smith has withdrawn from the producing firm of Smith and Golden. John L. Golden will continue producing. George Monroe, the comedian, is returning to the stage in the new Schubert Passing Show. Justine Johnson and Walter Wenger, the producer, were married in New York recently. Mrs. Wenger will soon be starred by her husband in Profane Love, founded upon a Balzac story. Margaret Mayo has obtained a divorce from her husband, Edgar Selwyn, the playwright. Cyril Maud is now playing in England in a new drama, Lord Richard in the Pantry. Ethel Barrymore is rehearsing a new play by Zoe Akins called Des Classes. Miss Akins is the author of Papa and The Magical City. Doris Kenyon and John Cumberland have the leading roles in Wilson Collinson and Avery Hopwood's farce, The Girl in the Limousine. Arthur Hopkins will soon produce a new play by Augustus Thomas. Marie Tempest is to return to America. She has just finished a tour of South Africa. Clyde Fitch's The Blue Mouse has been musicalised as The Little Blue Devil, with Lillian Lorraine and Bernard Granville in the principal roles. Muriel Ostrich, the film star, will soon be seen in The Dream Girl. Hugo Riesenfeld, director of the Rivoli and Rialto theatres, has written the score of a musical show, The Love Lamp. Harry B. Smith is the author of the book. The Screen. Harold Lloyd is said to be rapidly recovering from the effects of an accidental bomb explosion in Los Angeles. John Wenger, the subject of an article in the last issue of Shadowland, has been selected as art director of the new Capitol Theatre. Kay Laurel is to be starred at the head of her own company. Jack O'Brien will direct Miss Laurel. Metro has purchased James Cullen's The Cave Lady for May Allison's use. Abraham Schomer has signed Emily Stevens and Muriel Ostrich for his production The Sacred Flame. Vitagraph has re-signed Earl Williams for a term of years. Vitagraph is planning to present Antonio Moreno, now appearing in serials, in features after the first of the new year. Sidney Chaplin has returned from Europe. Marshall Nealon has purchased the rights to Booth Tarkington's Penrod stories, and he will place them with Wesley Barry, the freckle-faced boy of many pictures, as the young hero. Agnes Ayres is now a featured William Fox player. Edith Story is now on the coast, working upon her first Robertson Cole production. Among the big plays shortly to be produced by Vitagraph are The Great Divide, The City, The College Widow, and The Fortune Hunter. Jack Pickford's first Goldwyn production is a visualization of John Fox Jr.'s The Little Shepherd of Kingdom Come. David Griffith's new Eastern studio on the John Flagler estate at New Rochelle is now well underway. End of section 1.
Section 2 of Shadowland, November 1919. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Progress by Vara Macbeth Jones. A bauble world your realm no longer seems, vast Shadowland, whose heralding seemed jest, whose mirror yesterday flashed meagre themes that earned a fleeting smile or sigh at best, then passed from memory like the stuff of dreams. For your novitiate soon ended, time has wrought a miracle in scope and power. You hold the sesame to every clime, for worlds you bridge, and add to art's rich dower life's pictorial, some printed and sublime. And neither dare we hold your aim in scorn, for oft we glimpse a sermon vivid, real, find golden mirth for tired hearts that mourn, and newborn faith, our aching minds to heal when idols totter, here ideals are born. End of section 2. Read by Alan Mapstone.
Section 3 of Shadowland, November 1919. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Douglas Wood. A Dream of Dreams by C. Blythe Sherwood. Michio Ito, the name, the history, the personality, the symbol for which it stands, is, altogether, too big for a magazine story or any other printed kind. He takes much more space than can be measured to bind the limits of the beginning and the end of the tale. He requires a finer instrument than the writer as interpreter. It is the sort of material out of which Stuart Walker makes plays. Briefly, it is the fable of a boy, one who dreams and dreamt earnestly in Japan. A boy who has sought the world over for his home and has come to realize that, literally, he belongs to no place, that he has inherited the right to make one where he will. A boy who studied in Germany, played in Paris, and found, at last, who he was and who and why in England. A boy who in London one week was starving and had to pawn everything he possessed, only to wake up the next week to find his name blazoned on all the billboards, himself one of the most desired, the most talked of personages of the town. The land of the weeping willow tree, that is Ito's background. Violet skies, wisteria scent, and sandalwood. But away, way back, because Ito, when very young, left the Hanayagi school in Japan to continue his studies at the celebrated Dalcross School in Dresden. And after special courses in art and drama and literature, he went on seeking answers to his queries about these branches in India, Egypt, Africa, China, and Italy. He wanted to trace art to its very beginning. His one desire was to grasp everything there was to know about it. Ito's august father was an architect. Ito's family in Tokyo were prominent and wealthy. Ito did not have to work, but he always loved the theater, always. It was all play to him. It was the thing he cherished most. A few more or less Nippon pennies meant only, as Ito says, what you call here pin money. I liked rice cakes, and the tea parlors were charming, but the theater, to Michio, did not mean then, or will it ever, just a stage and footlights. Drama, Ito told me from his couch of orange velvet, is as fine a combination as the ballet. The ballet is the inseparable triumvirate of music, color, and rhythm. Drama adds another sovereign, literature. You do not know here, in one of the most beautiful cities of the universe, what drama is. You schedule first, when the piece is to open, and then you get ready to decide what it is going to be about. You say that in September this play will be presented, and yet it is only 2 or 3 weeks before the premiere that you begin to rehearse. What is the result? On the opening night, everyone is horribly fatigued. If they are not certain of their lines, they do not care. They are too tired. And the scenery? Never is it complete. The paint is still wet. The design not quite finished. This is not right. It is unnatural. It is forced. The atmosphere is tense. Everything and everyone could snap in a flash. That is not artistic. That sort of creation could never produce art. Why, we must be sure in art. We must not ask until we know what we want. We must not offer until we have something to give. We have to be calm. In Moscow? There you have your example of drama. A play given by the Stanislavski Theatre is gone over and over and over, not for 1 month, not for 2 months, but for a whole year. By the time the actors come before you, they are not acting. They are living adaptations of their roles. Ask the chorus girl there, or the woman of the ballet in any foreign country, why she is doing that sort of thing, and what possible reason she has to remain content at only being a bit of the performance, and she will answer, "How well I know. I love it." Question any of your ponies or your showgirls here, and what do they say? They have but one retort: money. And yet it is queer, is it not, that in the Orient we are all crazy to come west. After all, even if drama did have its origin in the East, its modern examples are chiefly found in the Occident. In the Orient we may be true, but in the West, you see, you are new. That is where, and that is how, the East and the West separate. The East has the perfect spiritual understanding of art, the West the perfect material. The East, Ito continued, letting the shadow of his hand fall on the wall, sees the shadow and does not question about the hand. The West knows exactly what the hand is for and understands its composition, but it dismisses utterly the perception of the shadow. And that, again, is not art. It is not balanced. The world cannot be divided against itself like that. These two, together, must grow to comprehend that when you move the hand away, you move the shadow away, and that when you toy with your fingers, the shadow dances also. Ito rose. He went over to his desk and returned to me with a presentation. It was a decorative pamphlet, and in gold, on green, one read, Michio Ito's School, 9 East, 59th Street. Art and the Artist, on the first page, represents Ito's belief that art is the symbol of love, and the embodiment of this symbol is the artist. Inasmuch as art is a symbol of love, Ito is certain, then, that it must be universal, giving a spiritual interpretation to the visible and the material significance to the invisible, and that he only is an artist who makes these two relations manifest. One cannot be an artist in the true sense of the word if he walks in one of these paths to the neglect of the other. The world cannot accept him as an artist unless he has a perfect understanding of both the spiritual and the material, with the skill to represent them both in a significant form. This much, however, I will say, he continued. The East may have its dreams, but you have your producers. Of course, that is not perfect. What matter dreams to the principle of good when they remain latent, inactive? And suppose you do construct towers that kiss the sky, and plays that crowd the theater. How can their fulfillment be truthful when they are without dreams? There is no doubt about it. Now is the time to bring these two together. The East can derive so much from the West, and the West, I am positive, is beginning to awaken to the fact that it has a great deal to learn from the East. My one goal, at present, is to help to make this ideal possible. As a child, I wanted to dance. I had to dance, but I did not know why. After years of study, my answer came. It was because dancing dealt with only the beautiful, and because everyone has his own feeling and his own expression. My dance is the expression of my feeling through the movements of my body. Then I became the dancer, Michio Ito. I did not know why. Art, beauty, love, these are eternal, and when the dancer dies, so does the dance. But introspection finally brought the light, and I see today my duty to myself. I know now why I am. My dance is also going to be the medium to my crusade. I go back to my country this summer so that I can organize the Japanese ballet. It is going to be a colossal thing, a wonderful thing. My company, however, will be limited to 25. I shall not send for them. They will come to me. That is only how I know that they will be those who want the painting, motion, tone that I do. We shall study a long time in Japan, and then we shall perform. 12 weeks or so in Paris. From there, the world will be our route. And do you know what I am going to do with the receipts? I am going to purchase something that I have always desired to have for myself and my friends, an island, one of the most exquisite Japanese landmarks in the inland sea. I have seen the ceiling of Italy, I have marveled at the green in Switzerland, but no place is more heavenly than the island I have in mind to buy in Japan. On that island will be built my dream of an institution. Around the university, villages will grow. The inhabitants can come from anywhere. The citizens will come from everywhere. It is going to be the center. Welcome to those who want to learn more and more about philosophy, literature, painting, sculpture, architecture, music, poesy, and dancing. Debussy, Rodin, and I talked this castle in the air over years ago when I was a child, and they helped me to spin my web. We knew it to be a universal dream, but never then did I think I should be so fortunate as to take the step. It is the place, Shaw and Mackay agree with me, that is needed to make the East West and the West East, the place where the twain do meet. This is Michio Ito's Dream of Dreams. End of Section 3. Read by Douglas Wood in Utah.
Section 4 of Shadowland, November 1919. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Claire. Shadowland, November 1919 by Various. The Lesson of Urban by Kenneth Macgowan. The movies are slowly making the acquaintance of Joseph Urban. 3 years ago, he created a stage setting for the Strand Theatre. 2 years ago, he redecorated the stage of the Rialto. Now this season, he has designed and built a gorgeous new picture frame for the Rivoli, and according to the gossip of Celluloid Broadway, he is to make a series of settings that will gradually fill the whole circuit of Paramount Artcraft theaters across the country. It is a slow way of getting acquainted, and it hasn't yet brought Urban into actual production. But, like most things in film history, it has been a swifter acquaintance than the drama made with this great scenic artist. Joseph Urban came to America in 1912. He had been an art director of the Vienna Hoftheater until Felix Weingartner, the conductor, and Henry Russell, head of the Boston Opera House, induced him to leave Austria and come to the new home of music drama in the Back Bay. For something over 2 years, his rich and brilliant settings, together with a good ensemble, made opera in Boston far more satisfying and moving than it ever was at the star-ridden Metropolitan before the war and public opinion forced Mr. Gotti to give up his Italian scene painters and employ men like Urban, Ansfield, the Russian, and Wenger, the Pelgerd, the Americans. But that was not until the season of 1917-18. Meantime, George C. Tyler and Florenz Ziegfeld had rescued Urban from the war wreckage of the Boston Opera House. Tyler got Urban to paint the settings for Phyllis Nielsen Terry's Twelfth Night and the Edward Sheldon fairy spectacle The Garden of Paradise during the season of 1914-15. Both plays failed, and if Ziegfeld had not appeared the next spring with a contract for the Follies, Urban's vogue on Broadway would have been still longer postponed. Incidentally, the Follies would have remained the same hodgepodge of American beauties that they had been since Ziegfeld began in 1907. Then came the huge Masque of Caliban for the celebration of the Shakespeare tercentenary. After that, more Follies, musical comedies for Claw and Erlanger, a little short-lived Shakespeare for James K. Hackett, and half a dozen unsuccessful comedies and dramas, with the capitulation of the Metropolitan Opera House to the new stagecraft and its principal American protagonist somewhere in between. But in all Urban's 7 years in America, the mass of big Broadway public and the millions of the road have yet to see his work in serious drama. They can judge it only by opera and musical comedy. Fortunately, however, in these variegated fields, practically all that he has to give in theory or practice has been foreshadowed. Urban's work is a part of the great movement towards a new sort of imaginative and vital, expressive type of production which swept Russia, Germany, and to some extent Paris, London, and Dublin from 1905 to 1915. Its twin gods were Gordon Craig and Adolf Appia. They were supplied with the usual number of prophets, Max Reinhardt, Stanislavski, Jacques Rouchet, and a score more. The first tenet of the new faith is the expression in scenery and lights of the atmosphere of the play. The scenery must not try to win applause for itself like some vainglorious star. It must exist only to make the mood of the play clearer to the audience. Thus, the setting for La Belle Helene and the lighting indicated in the sketch picture a fantastic Greece as airy and joyous and irresponsible as the music of Offenbach's delicious satire on the Homeric story of Helen of Troy. A second tenet is simplicity. The artist must get rid of everything that is going to clutter up a stage and interfere with actors on the one hand, and clear beauty and expressiveness on the other. Take the scene in heaven from Leitz's St. Elizabeth, as Urban has sketched it for the Metropolitan Opera House. The golden streets of that city are nowhere to be seen, nor the angelic hosts. Indeed, a little of the base earth is still to be seen at each side in the trees of the forest, at whose feet Elizabeth dies in the preceding scene. And yet, in that great blue sky and the single grace-filled arch, heightened by a miraculous and lambent light, there is all of heavenly kingdom of the saints. The gates of heaven stand wide. The modern stage artist simplifies, but he does not make barren. He retains the thing which suggests to the mind of the audience far more than he could ever paint. Consider the sketch of the church scene in Gounod's Faust. Following a suggestion of Erler, the Munich artist, Urban had concentrated the whole cathedral and all the authority and mercy of the church in a single great column of the nave. Above us we feel the whole majesty and grace of Gothic architecture. Note also that while suggestion has brought us the whole edifice of faith, the simplicity from which it springs permits the girl Marguerite to stand out in her proper dramatic proportions. In an elaborate cathedral scene, complete and detailed, she would be lost. Here she stands revealed. The new scenic artist brought into the theater the simple and one would imagine obvious principles of all pictorial art which the conventional scene painters neglected in trying to paint real shadows and build canvas churches and tinsel heavens. A good many of the older men and young ones of no more ability or mental grasp are now trying to imitate the men of the modern school. But however much they may try to be simple or to use suggestion and symbolism, one test usually vanquishes them. They may adopt the impressionist broken color as the moderns have done instead of flat mixed paint, hiding the thinness of their canvas and giving sparkle and life to their colors, but they never master design. They cannot compose. Their stage designs have none of the proportion and balance of mass and of light and shade which you will find in such a sketch of the new movement as Urban's drawing for the Jewess. Now, what of all this belongs to movies? Certainly the decorative value and architectural distinction which Urban can give to the stage frame about the silver sheet. So much has already been taken by the movies, but why not more? Why not ask another artist with a different style to do what Hugo Ballin has done for Goldwyn in his simplified settings? Imagine the scene from Faust on the screen. The same single column soaring out of the camera's eye up to the infinite. The same dim background lit with half-shadows revealing nothing, unless it is the terrors of Mephistopheles that hang about the girl. Strength and reality in that great column. All the spirit of the church in its uplifting lines and in the comforting flicker of the candles. All the threats and terror of the devil in the black distances. Is it worth remarking, in the hope that some producer may profit by it, that such a church, made of one column, one piece of property, some nondescript wings or draperies, and about 1/10 the ordinary amount of electric current, would be surprisingly more expressive than a board and plaster atrocity for which our failure-harassed movie-makers now spend thousands? And what can be done with a church can be done with a slave market. A huge Greek column seems just a bit taller and bigger if you show only 10 feet of its gigantic base. A whole Arabian Nights city, as gigantic in the mind's eye as Brennan's palace of a daughter of the gods, can be fused from the base of a column, the corner of a great wall, the foot of an arch, and a window with the silhouette of a turret in the distance, and a dozen of such little bits of a great immensity which only exists in the imagination of the audience. But the producer will doubtless go on spending money. He likes plaster streets that cost $20,000. They make him feel important. It takes an artist or an ordinary movie fan to walk down the corridors of the imagination. That is the lesson of Urban. Urban's present work and methods are a curious growth of his early career. As a boy, he went to art school in Vienna, while his father, who happened to be the superintendent of schools, thought him safely ensconced in a law class. Not satisfied with one art school, young Urban went to two at once, the Viennese Academy of Fine Arts in the mornings and the Polytechnic in the afternoons. One gave him architecture from the angle of pure art, the other from the practical side. When Urban's father discovered that his boy was disobeying his instructions and avoiding the study of law, the parental wrath descended. Young Urban's art career would have come to a sorry end had he not made a friend and patron of the president of the Academy and architect to the Emperor Baron Hausner. He placed Urban in his own studio, and at 23 secured him a commission to redecorate one of the palaces of the Khedive of Egypt. From this early triumph, Urban went on to a great mass of work which included the building of castles for such nobles as Count Esterhazy, the Rathskeller and the Rathus in Vienna country villas, and the Tsar's bridge over the Neva in Petrograd, the result of winning an international competition, and the management of Imperial Jubilee. When he first designed rooms to house art exhibitions, his work began to tend towards the sort of expressive decoration which he now contributes to the stage. In 1900 he went to Paris to arrange the Australian art exhibit at the exposition. He found a great many more paintings on hand than could possibly be hung, and as sole juror he promptly threw out all the academic, conventional, and recognized artists for the younger men. The result, when Urban returned to Vienna, was a row which resulted in a score of artists leaving the Vienna Academy with him to found a famous secession society, for which he designed a remarkable building. The creation of such exhibition rooms obviously suggests work for the stage. For the walls in a museum should, ideally, suggest the nature of the pictures on view just as much as scenery should suggest the mood of the action in a play. In 1904, his friendship with the director of the Vienna Hofburgtheater led Urban to join another artist, Heinrich Leffler, in the designing of scenery. During the next 8 years, he made settings for the Vienna Hofburgtheater, the Vienna Hofoperntheater, and the Komische Opera in Berlin, and in various theaters in Braunschweig, Mannheim, Cologne, Stuttgart, Lauchstadt, Charlottenburg, Hamburg, Duisburg, Budapest, and finally in 1912 he came to America. The logic which drove the architect into scenic decoration is unescapable. His early study had served him well by bringing him a wide knowledge of periods and detail. It also brought him a fine appreciation of the importance of new methods of lighting the stage. He has never met footlights in public buildings, and he prefers for the stage the wonderful varied shadows of daylight and the depths of night which have decorated palace, wall, and gate as no row of staring footlights ever could do. Scheming out sources of beautiful and effective lighting in his buildings, Urban learned the great lesson which he expresses thus: paint not so much with colors, surfaces, and artificial perspectives, as with the actual glories of light itself. In a similar way, Urban's training as an architect showed him that the essential problem in stage design is how to make a place upon the stage express the mood of what goes on there. The architect has always faced a double problem that roughly corresponds to this. The complexity of the architect's work, ranging from plumbing to matters of pure design, is a splendid preparation for the immense number of practical details that enter into either a stage or a screen production. He sees that the designing of scenery is a great deal more than a matter of painting a picture on a backdrop and calling it a production. That is the fault into which the Russian painters, Bakst in particular, have fallen. Out of his experience as an architect as well as a producer, Urban has drawn a deep belief in scenic design as a rounded art of many factors. The new art of the theater, he has said, is more than a matter of mere scenery. It concerns the entire production. The scenery is of no use at all unless it fits the play and the playing perfectly. The new art is a fusion of what is pictorial with what is dramatic. It demands not only new designs in scenery, but new stage directors who understand how to train actors in speech, gesture, and pose to harmonize with the setting. They must know how to establish a single key for the whole production. It must be a key in which simplicity and suggestion are the most essential factors. End of section 4.
Section 5 of Shadowland, November 1919. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. From the Poet's Wife, by La Touche Hancock. Read by ShrimpPhish. He writes of Isabel and Jane, until I nearly go insane. He writes of Jessamine and May, until my raven locks grow gray. He writes again, and once again, of all these girls in loving strain. But oh, I wish once in his life he'd write an ode to me, his wife. End of section 5. Section 6 of Shadowland, November 1919. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by ShrimpPhish. Shadowland, November 1919, by Various. Constance, by C. Blythe Sherwood. Nothing worthwhile was ever attained without suffering and hard work, said Miss Binny. That is one of my lines in Miss Crother's play, and I love it. It's so true. It comes back to me every minute when I want something awfully, and it makes me realize that the only way in which I can obtain that thing is to strive for it, and the bigger the thing, the more I have to strive. I suppose I'll be striving all my life. I want so much. Miss Binny laughed, a delightful Penelope Penn chuckle. Of course, I mean striving in wanting, too. We must not give up our dreams when they begin to materialize. Besides, it seems to me that when we want hard enough, we're praying, and prayers are always answered when they're right, aren't they? Did you want hard enough to become a stage celebrity and a screen star? That's just it. All my life I've wanted to play. I was crazy to get into the theater, but I wished and wished so much that I worked terribly hard towards it, and in all that time of conscientious study I never had a minute to spare in which to cry out loud and say, I want. Subconscious, those were my longings, unspoken, all of my prayers. You see, as a child I loved to dance. Mother let me take lessons from Isadora Duncan's sister. I was 4 years old when I started, and how well I remember the class. We were all youngsters. The mothers used to sit around and gape with wonder at the tininess of us, and became furious with jealousy when we had to take off our shoes and stockings. It's different nowadays, isn't it? Well, I went to school in Paris and came back to Westover in Connecticut to be finished. I was never finished, however, because it just happened that at one of our fêtes in which I danced, Mr. Winthrop Ames was present. Mr. Ames told me that he would give me an engagement if ever the chance arose. The opportunity came later in a little play which he produced called Saturday to Monday. I left everything at Westover, you can't blame me, and accepted the offer. Although the piece was very pretty, it only lasted from Saturday to Monday. But Mr. Guest saw me and asked me to be in Oh, Lady, the musical comedy by Mr. Wodehouse and Mr. Bolton. Dreams and wishes began to come true then. I danced in the Wodehouse piece, and the papers noticed me. I danced in extra bits, and when the leading lady, Vivienne Siegel, was taken ill, I substituted in her place. It was funny, I'd never sung before. I was horribly frightened at first, and I used to finish the song as soon as I could, and I'd fill up the verses with dancing. The first wonderful season closed. That was last year, and they wanted me to keep Miss Siegel's part in the Chicago company. But I don't exactly know what it was. Something told me to remain here, advised me not to leave New York, now that dreams have begun to come true. So I accepted an offer from Mr. Ziegfeld to appear on his roof. I stayed only one night, however. I didn't care for it. It's queer how easy life is when you know, even subconsciously, what you want. A few days after I left Mr. Ziegfeld, I was invited to a tea, and perhaps I was able to go just because I was not doing anything at that time. Mr. Henry Hull was there, and he said, "Don't you remember? We played together years ago in your father's office when we were children." And of course I did. It all came back. Henry in knickers. I, curls and socks. Father had introduced me to this nice young chap who was working with him in his law office when I called one day. Of all the Hull boys, Henry Howard, who is Margaret Anglin's husband, and Shelley, who died last year and left us one of the sweetest memories in the theatre world. Henry was the last to go on the stage. For a long while he was with my father. He never thought of the stage in those days. Neither did I. That afternoon at the tea party, Henry suddenly said, "Can you act?" "I don't know. I never did. But I want to," I answered. "Well, please go to see Miss Rachel Crothers tomorrow. You're just the type she needs to play opposite me in our new play, 39 East. I went to Miss Crothers. "Please read this," she said, offering me a handwritten script. I stumbled through the lines somehow, but that was just the way they were supposed to be delivered, stumblingly, and I was nervous. I wept, and that was what she wanted, someone to cry that part. She was very kind to me and gave me the play to take home and told me to return in a few days after I had read the entire part. Miss Crothers had not yet begun planning or rehearsing, and every bit of the play was written in longhand. I took it to Mr. Ames. I wanted to go to him anyway with the happy news. He had my part typewritten for me in his office right then and there, and he told me to go away and study it. That's all I did for 2 days. Study. I returned to her then with the long last speech of the third act memorized, and here I am. Here happened to be no other place but Maxine Elliott's very own dressing room in the Maxine Elliott Theatre, where she and Mr. Hull were playing to standing room every night. Flowers were everywhere, all sorts, roses pink and white and red, and daisies and sweet peas, from everywhere too, from her mother's place in Lyme, Connecticut, from her managers of the Real Art Pictures who had just sent greetings to their new star, from her admirers and friends, both acquainted and unacquainted. One of the things that makes her happy is to receive these loving tributes from people whom she has never seen, and perhaps will never see, but who are grateful to her for the pleasure she gives them. And with all her wanting hard enough to be of the theatre, you would hardly connect her with the stage. She's so simple and natural and vivacious. "Fair," she'll answer to your question about her sister. "Fair and I cannot get along without each other, and yet we're so different. No, I'm not racing Fair. We're not sisters to see who'll get there first and who'll capture most. She helps me a lot. She has a great deal that I haven't. And I suppose I help her too. In fact, we've just grabbed each other's hands and we're running along, side by side." End of section 6.
Section 7 of Shadowland, November 1919. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Arnav Darnal. Shadowland, November 1919. By Various. Erstwhile Susan, by Jane Ward. Why any lady should feel for Marion Pop, marvelled Barnabetta. As though there wasn't enough troubles in this world already yet. The Duchess paused from her scratching in the unproductive gravel of the side yard to utter a solicitous cluck. The contents of the churn slapped the sides with unabated vigour. Kingdoms might fall, thrones totter, Pop might go wooing, but butter must come by 5 o'clock of a Thursday afternoon. Whatever. Barnabetta, a combination of the 2 parental names which had been Mrs. Dreary's single flash of poetry in a life of dull prose, swept back the elf locks from her forehead with the back of one thin little arm, and continued her soliloquy, a habit which she shared with the immortal Hamlet, and, for a similar reason, there was no one who cared to hear what she said, or would understand if they did hear. I may be wonderful dumb, but I ain't dumb enough to marry Abel Butcher, even if Pop did give him the say I should. Him with his long face and his goat whiskers, and so awful near too. The Duchess cackled, probably with mirth, and ate a grasshopper. Pickings were poor at the Drury farm for small white girls and big white hens, and this was a bond between them. This and the fact that they both belonged to the despised sex. They were both contemptuously female. It was a quaint scene they presented to the young man who approached up the walk between its bright borders of phlox and bachelor's buttons. Barnabetta's foolishness, her brothers called them. The late afternoon scattered largesse of gold through the branches of the gnarled old cherry tree on Barnabetta's gingham pinafore. Her intent, serious little face, under the straggling locks of bright brown hair, on the friendly hen apparently conversing with her at her feet. The old churn was clumsy to manage, but a delightful dull red. The old house was ramshackle, but a charming lichened grey. "I beg your pardon," smiled the young man, and swept his hat off with a beautifully manicured white hand. "But could you suggest how I can get an automobile out of the hole in the bridge down yonder? The front wheels are pretty thoroughly stuck, and I'm afraid it will take a horse to move it." Barnabetta's mouth opened, and remained open, no words issuing. In all her 17 years, no radiantly wonderful being had ever taken off his hat to her. The Mennonites didn't hold with such foolishness, as tending to make females forget their proper station. Then, a strange thing happened. Barnabetta grew, before his face and eyes, beautiful, as though, behind the dull little face, a rosy lamp had been lighted, and she shone softly. "My," breathed Barnabetta rapturously. "My," and so saying, she turned and led the amazed young man down to the barn, from whence she emerged leading old Tilly, an apathetic mare to whom this duty was no new one, for Pop Drury, to eke out his income, had thriftily loosened the boards in the bridge and made quite a little sum hauling luckless automobiles therefrom. During the walk to the bridge, the young man chatted pleasantly, trying to put her at her ease. His name, it appeared, was David Jordan, and he was touring with his sister Theodora and his friend Edgar Barrett. But Barnabetta spoke not at all, for the simple reason that she had nothing to say. The taking off of a white Panama hat had revolutionized her world. The others in the car smiled at the odd little figure, and the lady in the marvellous silk coat and floating blue veil held out a white-gloved hand patronizingly. "Oh," cried Barnabetta, from the overwhelming deeps of a full heart, "ain't you too beautiful yet? And so stylish already." Old Tilly performed her function methodically, and the car stood on the further side of the gap. David Jordan tried to put a bill into Barnabetta's hard little hand, but she shook her head. "No, mister, I take shame to be paid. But if you'd feel for me to have those books, I'd feel to take 'em something wonderful." And her eyes burning with desire, she pointed to the dull-looking textbook and 2 magazines lying on the seat. "What a quaint child," Theodora Jordan drawled as the car sped away from the blue pinafored figure clasping its treasure to her flat little breast. "And what uncouth language! To think that English is murdered in this fashion, not 20 miles away from Waterford College and the tutelage of the eminent Dr. Barrett, philologist and Ph.D. Edgar Barrett refused a smile. He was a cynical young man who took himself very seriously, and so far he had managed, by superhuman guile, to remain single in spite of the earnest efforts of, so he believed, hundreds of women to marry him. Theodora Jordan, snobbish, ultra-cultivated and beautiful, felt that the goal of orange blossoms and Mendelssohn was in sight, however, and was concerned to see the undignified and unscholastic efforts of President Jordan to crane his neck around in order to watch the absurd little Mennonite maid. "It would be an interesting experiment," he intoned, as the car swept about a curve, erasing Barnabetta, "to experiment with an untutored, unsophisticated mind like that. Indeed, it has long been one of my pet theories that it is possible in a single generation to disprove heredity. If she had had a snub nose and mouse-coloured hair, he wouldn't be theorising," the haughty Miss Jordan reflected. "Luckily, there isn't a chance in the world of putting his theories to test." Theodora spoke without counting on fate, that bony spinster who has no sympathy for the matrimonial plans of her sex. Between the Drury farm, Pop and Jacob and Emmanuel, the cooking, the churning, the cleaning and whatever, and the serene halls of Waterford College 20 tangible miles intervened, and a whole world, and yet it all developed from Pop's marriage. Upon a morning some 3 weeks later, Barnabetta, having breakfasted her 3 lords of creation, carried buckets of hot water upstairs for their shaving, pressed their trousers and shined their 3 pairs of heavy cowhide boots, was summoned to hear the masculine edict. "Barnabetta," Pop scowled, "I'm marrying me today with a well-fixed, sensitive lady, and 2 females in the house at one ain't so necessary. They're a terrible expense already. I've give Abel Butcher leave to have you, and the sooner you get married, yeah, it's better." Barnabetta drew a gaspy breath. She took a step forward, looking at the walls as though she expected them to fall upon her and crush her at once, but forced her quaking lips on. "Pop, I want to go to college and get learning. I feel for books something fine, and I will never keep company with Abel Butcher. Not never, never, never." For an instant, pure surprise removed the power of speech from Barnaby Dreary. Then his face grew a slow, dull purple. Taking a single step forward, he picked his daughter up by the back of her frock and, holding her dangling like a kitten, spanked her with a huge freckled paw. "You, a female, haven't a dare to say what you'll do." Jacob regarded the contretemps with round, dull china blue eyes. He was a fat, pimply youth who shared the Mennonite view of the opposite sex, but he was canny. "Being ain't so good for females, Pop," he urged. "We can done for work already." This sensible view of the matter appealed to Pop Dreary, who set Barnabetta down upon her feet with a final shake, satisfied that he had dealt with the situation in a practical manner, and that hereafter his daughter would know her place already. If he could have foreseen the thunderbolt that he was about to hurl by his own act into his peaceful domestic scheme, he would have removed his marrying regalia of black broadcloth that smelled of mothballs, and the unaccustomed stiff collar, and have fled to the fields to put in a thrifty day among the turnips rather than take a chance with a wife. But Miss Miller, the well-fixed lady, had an income of 1,000 a year, and Barnaby Dreary was already spending it upon thoroughbred hogs and a new cowhouse. So, unwitting the future, he departed to commit matrimony, and returned at supper time, escorting the new Mrs. Dreary. This lady was lean and long, and, according to Barnabetta's wide-eyed gaze, wonderful stylish. Her hair was frizzled until it resembled the interior of a hair mattress, and, arranged in terraces, eked out with a switch of a different shade. Her dress was worldly, a black silk ruffled and frilled, and she moved with mincing step, holding her elbows close to her sides in a manner the height of the genteel. Barnaby was subdued and uneasy, and, wonder of wonders, he was carrying the lady's carpet-bags instead of leaving her do the totting. He jerked an elbow toward Barnabetta, explaining sourly, "This here's my daughter, Juliet, and those there are my boys, Jacob and Emmanuel. And now you better get your work clothes on and give me my supper yet." The new Mrs. Dreary disdained her husband's suggestion completely, and, undulating to Barnabetta, kissed her, a loud, tender smack. "Ah, dear spouse," she beamed. "It is evident you do not understand the delicate nature blossoming here. My sweet child, I want you to feel that we are not only mother and daughter, but comrades, confidants, playmates." Barnabetta almost swooned. It was the first kiss that she had ever received. It seemed to her a bold thing, almost indecent, yet oddly pleasant. But her father's scowl sent her scuttling across the room to lift the heavy carpet-bags and turn toward the stairs. "I'm so sensitive yet, or stylish. Better I should do the totting," she said matter-of-factly, but her stepmother stopped her, and with a graceful wave of the arm, à la Delsarte, toward the lowering youths, indicated the bags. "Chivalry, dear sons," she smiled. "Surely, my esteemed gentlemen, you will not permit of a lady's carrying burdens in your presence." A storm was brewing in Jacob's outraged stares and Emmanuel's dropped jaw, but Juliet seemed unaware of it. Her next remark, delivered softly to no one in particular, was without guile. "I require harmony about me, my delicate, sensitive nature. and we will have harmony. I am, as I told my revered spouse, well fixed, and the money is all in my name. Upstairs, the three dreary males regarded one another dubiously over the despised carpet bags. Jacob glowered. "Tarnation, Pop! Are you going to let that bed-slap female have the dare to run us yet?" Barnaby Dreary scratched his head. "I'll learn her," he growled. "No female woman can run me. All. I'll learn her to disobey her mister." But his tone lacked resolution. Downstairs, at this moment, Barnabetta and her stepmother stared into one another's faces, and then a new strange sound gurgled out on the startled atmosphere of the dark old kitchen. Barnabetta was laughing. "Poor Pop! And to think I took so sorry for you to marry him. But are you going to dress plain now? Us folks always cut off our hair and put on caps and brown stuff dresses when we get a mister yet." Mrs. Dreary smiled self-satisfiedly and smoothed down her voluminous ruffles with a beringed hand. "I think not, my charming daughter. Be patient, and you will observe a number of changes in this household. Among others, I intend that you shall have an opportunity to partake of learning, and, to that end, I have already summoned the village schoolmaster to prepare you for the advanced curricula of that fountainhead of wisdom, those halls of intellectual endeavour, Waterford College." Barnabetta flung the back of her work-worn little hand across her lips, and over it she stared, unbelieving her ears, at this wondrous being who had come like a fairy godmother to bring her dearest dreams true. "You couldn't mean, Mum," she gasped. "You couldn't mean it yet." "Yet, my sweetest child, is not refined parlance," Mrs. Dreary chided. "And do not call me Mum. Call me Juliet. Not, indeed, that is my name, for I was erstwhile Susan, but Juliet is so symphonious, so harmonic, so much more in tune with my true and poetic nature. As for the college, it is true, as you shall see." The Drearys saw many strange things within the next few weeks. Saw a female actually sitting, of an evening, before the melodeon in the parlour, that room sacred to funerals, and singing "Listen to the Mockingbird" instead of pressing the trousers of the household. Saw Barnabetta bent over unwholesome volumes filled with foolishness instead of greasing her betters' shoes. Saw the ungodly spectacle of Jacob and Emmanuel furiously carrying up their own shaving water. Saw Barnaby Dreary meditating assertion, and at length his meditation took the form of action. Rising heavily from his chair by the checked oilcloth table, he shuffled into the parlour and approached his spouse with undershot jaw. "Stop your dumb screeching, female," he roared. "My patience is all. I married Juliet to do the chores, and I don't feel for no singing around." "Listen to the mockingbird," trolled Juliet, erstwhile Susan, blithely. Barnaby's great fist shot out, hovered over the frizzled crimps threateningly, then crumbled down. Like a stone, Dreary fell to the floor and lay still, his eyes rolling in his head, his lips moving soundlessly. Barnabetta ran to his side, trembling, but Mrs. Dreary remained calmly seated at the melodeon, gazing meditatively at the stricken man. "He has brought it upon himself. 'Twas ever thus," she murmured. "I fear me that mine honoured spouse will not hereafter be in a position to impose his will upon his household." And she spoke prophetically. Paralysed completely, save for his voice and temper, Barnaby Dreary waved from beneath his patchwork counterpane in vain, as Juliet, erstwhile Susan, continued calmly her revolutionary way, completely cowing the boys by her superior vocabulary, and aiding and abetting Barnabetta to the extent of finally departing with her to enter her in Waterford College. Barnabetta, in a stiff silk modelled after her stepmother's with tiers of ruffles, with her soft hair tortured into frizzles, and wearing a manner of conscious gentility, elbows pressed the sides, little fingers quirked, sat in the office while Juliet conversed with the registrar. She had serene faith in her appearance, despite the fact that the other girls who passed along the corridors and stared at her with giggling whispers wore simple little serges and did their hair in smooth braids and coils. And as she sat there in painful propriety, her eyes fell on a tall, well-dressed man with scholastic beard coming out of an inner office. President Barrett felt himself with more or less truth to be the cynosure of admiring eyes. He defended himself with a mantle of aloof dignity and moved down the hall, apparently reflecting upon the evolution of man, when suddenly, horrors! A small, ridiculous figure in outlandish garments stood before him, holding out a friendly hand. "Maybe you don't remember me. I'm Barnabetta Drury, and I pulled your auto out of that hole in the bridge when you couldn't make. I'm glad to see you again yet. No, not yet." She reverted to the impressive speech of gentility. "I have come to pursue my curricula in your venerable institution, and I am most happy to have met you again." Blushing furiously, Edgar Barrett stammered something and fled, conscious that in some strange way the outlook for a pleasant year had considerably brightened. During the months that followed, he saw a transformation take place in the little Mennonite. Barnabetta was no fool. She saw very soon that her clothes, her frizzes, her anxiously acquired mannerisms were somehow absurd, and changed them adroitly to the pattern of the other girls. Naturally quick, she made amazing progress in her books, and, at the end of her first year, stood head and shoulders above her class. Yet, in one respect, Barnabetta had not changed. She still cherished for her stepmother Juliet, erstwhile Susan, an awe and veneration unchanged by her newfound standards. Underneath the acquired sophistication, she was still a Mennonite, and Mrs. Drury was the only female that had ever had the dare to stand up against Pop already. On her part, erstwhile Susan took great delight in introducing Barnabetta as my precocious daughter, returned from a session at the fountainhead of learning. Pop and the boys were glumly silent, but Abel Butcher, longer of face than ever, nearer of purse, came often to sit upon the Drury steps and stare at Barnabetta with grudging approbation that noted the tasteful arrangement of her shining brown hair and her simple, indescribably worldly clothes, and compared them favourably with the dumpy, wasteless Mennonite damsels. "Oh, I suppose, it'd be a wonderful expense to a man," he sighed, and then, jealously, "Maybe you could get a mister at that college yet." Barnabetta blushed, but shook her head demurely, though two faces flashed to her mind, that of David Jordan, lean, quizzical, with the grave, gentle eyes, and that of Edgar Barrett, always the president of a college for young ladies, but apt to forget the trend of his erudite remarks anent English essayists when he glanced, as he did with increasing frequency, at her corner of the classroom. During the next 2 long vacations, Barnabetta remained at the college, tutoring, working in the library, and occasionally going out driving in the dark green presidential car, to the furious dismay of Miss Theodora Jordan, whose hopes were still unrealized, and seemed to be actually threatened by a little Dutch hit from nowhere. It made her almost, but not quite as angry, to observe the eager quickening of her brother's glance when it rested on Barnabetta's vivid little face, and when, the morning after her graduation, David announced with satisfaction that he had persuaded the brightest little political economist in the world to be his secretary for the summer and help him with his campaign for the senatorship, Theodora ventured frigid remonstrance. "Really, David, do you think it's quite discreet, quite wise? Of course, she's socially an impossible little creature, but she isn't bad-looking in a quaint way, and it's very important not to imperil your reputation just now, with so much at stake." A strange look on the lean-lined face warned her to stop where she was, and, inwardly fuming, Theodora swallowed her anger as well as she could, and managed to be quite polite and quite amazingly disagreeable to Barnabetta when she arrived. From the girl's letters to Juliet, erstwhile Susan, that estimable lady got no hint of the trouble in the girl's heart. She wrote cheerfully that she was glad to have a little part in electing the wonderful Mr. Jordan to the Senate, and was working hard, but was well, and how is poor Pop and the boys? Mrs. Drury, frizzier than ever and ruffled to her pointed chin, read the letters aloud with pride as she fed the paralytic his milk toast. "Where's the grape jar I said I felt for?" growled Pop, unheeding. "Why didn't you ain't? You, a female, have dared to disobey your mister? I'll line you, Juliet. I'll line you yet." "I deem it highly probable," his spouse reflected, "that our estimable child will one of these days fill a worthy position in the world, and then, my beloved Barnaby, With what pride will we reflect upon our humble part in elevating her thus? One day in early November, Mrs. Drury, placidly turning the handle of the churn with one toe while she perused the romantic novel, looked up as a shadow fell across the book to find Barnabetta standing in the doorway of the kitchen. Under the modish little hat, the girl's face was very pale, and there were lavender shadows beneath her eyes, which brimmed with tears. Forgetting to be genteel, Juliet, erstwhile Susan, hurried to her and gathered her against the hard jet bangles of her gown. "I've been silly, Mum." Barnabetta smiled shakily after a moment. "I believed that the Constitution could make all women free and equal, but it can't. I'm just Barnabetta Drury, Mennonite, and, as Miss Theodora Jordan told me, I ought to be thankful that I have had more advantages than most of my class, and not ungratefully try to aspire to the class above." She dried her eyes, took off her hat, and tied a gingham apron about her slim waist. "Now I'm going to finish the churning, and afterwards," mischief twisted her lips in spite of their quivering, "afterwards I'll press Jacob and Emmanuel's trousers yet, to show that I realise my rightful position as a female." But as they all sat a little later about the supper table, a step sounded on the walk, and David Jordan was among them, with eyes for Barnabetta alone. Theodora told me what she had done. His mouth was grim. He held her hands close, looking down into her eyes eagerly. "Barnabetta, how could you run away like that? Didn't you know that I—" Then, for the first time, he saw the others, Pop glowering from his pillows, Jacob with hanging mouth waiting to receive the piece of pie balanced on his knife as he stared, Juliet simpering genteelly with crooked little finger as she drank her tea. Barnabetta's small bright head went up proudly as she introduced them to him, the boys merely grunting in acknowledgement, while Mrs. Drury burst into a flowery panegyric of welcoming. It was David Jordan and Juliet, erstwhile Susan, who did the talking during the rest of the meal, broken occasionally by Pop's wine that he felt for meat victuals something wonderful, and the boys' sibilant draughts of tea. Afterwards, Barnabetta and the visitor walked up and down the path between the ragged robins and the flocks, and he told her, quite casually, that he had been elected senator. "Oh!" cried Barnabetta joyously. "Oh, I'm so glad!" And then she broke off and tried to release her hands with a little frightened smile. "No, you mustn't. Please, Mr. Jordan, please." "I love you, Barnabetta," David Jordan told her quietly. He had to bend to hear her painful whisper. "But you saw us. And my people. I'm just an ordinary girl." "Never ordinary." His big voice boomed with an undertone of vibrant joy. "Sweetheart, tell me you'll marry me and help me be a good senator." "I can't do without you, Barnabetta. Possibly." Soft colour flooded her lifted face. Her eyes were full of tender mirth. "Who am I, a female," said Barnabetta, "to have the dare to say no?" End of section 7.
Section 8 of Shadowland, November 1919. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Shadowland, November 1919 by Various. Genius in a Strait-Jacket by Frederick F. Schrader. I recently saw an actor taking part in a benefit performance who astounded me. The play was a little parlor comedy in which he played the part of a husband who has to deal with an hysterically sentimental young man who is in love with his wife. He astounded me because I had never seen him do anything so artistically finished and quietly effective. I had always seen him play eccentric policeman, and had seen him often in the course of years. Like myself, the public knew this actor only as a counterfeit policeman, and the only reason was that he had never been permitted to do anything else. I know an actress, once a Broadway favorite in light opera, who was so glad to make an honest living in moving pictures that she consented to play an Irish Molly of the most pronounced type. But terror overcame her when she realized that once identified with the role, She would be irrevocably doomed to play Irish Mollies the rest of her life. Nothing but a fluke saved her from that fate, but she was justified in her apprehension. Her terror betrays a peculiar condition besetting the American stage. It is the type mania. Specifically, if an actor becomes marked as the successful interpreter of a certain type of characters, his value as the portrayer of any other class of roles is restricted or actually made impossible. If chance assigns him to the métier of domestics with a dialect, he can seldom emancipate himself. He must dwarf and repress his artistic stature to fit his condition of servitude. Thus, the American stage has a well-defined class cult with all its prejudices and hatreds. In the good old days of the drama, no such distinctions prevailed, and the fact that it is now well established works a regrettable injury to the drama in the gradual suppression of creative artistic power in the actor. Beyond the general division of actors into classifications designated as leading man, heavy, juvenile, walking gent, first old man, light comedian, low comedian, etc., and relatively the same with the women, no special tags were formerly employed to determine a player's line of work. This system provided a latitude which enabled the individual to shine in diversified roles. The modern system of casting a play takes no account of the former method. It really is not a system, but a happy-go-lucky manner of getting results, according to which actors are broadly, if not literally, rated as barkeepers, detectives, political bosses, slim girls, fat girls, cooks, dagos, priests, chauffeurs, crooks, etc. The list is endless, of course. In brief, the actor has no fixed professional classification. Whatever he happens to be born to, so to speak, is what he remains. His artistic organism and temperament are less likely to be considered than the color of his hair, age, height, size, weight, and complexion. In this manner, one of the chief elements of art, to imitate nature, is sacrificed, and the spiritual and mental endowments of acting are subordinated to the purely physical. The imaginative part gives way to the crass materialism of bulk, fiber, and gravity. When John T. Raymond played Colonel Sellers, when Stuart Robson played Bertie the Lamb, E. H. Southern, Lord Dundreary, and the crushed tragedian, Mrs. W. J. Florence, the wife of the Honourable Bardwell Sloat, and Florence, Captain Cuttle in Dickens's Dombey and Son, they gave a concrete demonstration of acting as a fine art, because they buried their own identity in their parts. Lionel Barrymore did this in his delineation of Colonel Ibbotson. Frank Keenan did it in playing Jack Rance, the sheriff, in The Girl of the Golden West. We still have a number of character actors who employ real art in depicting types of American life, but we have all been compelled to see wholly inadequate and sometimes wholly distorted figures on the stage within spheres that were beyond the realization of our players, not because they were not the type, but because they had ceased to regard acting as a creative art by neglecting to absorb from the study of books of biography and manners the endowing elements of interest. As we have no longer any plays of manners and historical periods, the stage cannot, of course, supply the school. From the long-continued neglect of striving to get under the skin of a character, our foremost actors are called on to do little but act themselves. That is, they reverse the method of their predecessors. Instead of adjusting their art to the role, they adjust the role to their personality, bringing such art to bear upon it as they can command or deem necessary. No matter what the part may be, they are always themselves. Primarily, this indictment rests against the majority of our stellar actors. Their subordinates are selected according to type. The late John Mason was an actor of great experience. I have seen how excellent he could be in some of the English drawing-room comedies of 20 years ago. I have seen him play an English butler and act in standard plays as a member of a stock company. He was then truly an actor of many parts. As soon as he became an established favorite in New York with Mrs. Fiske, as the gentleman gambler in The Witching Hour, etc., he figuratively cast off the livery of his art and acted himself only. His personality was interesting, his method had dignity, his manners were finished, but his characters were all John Masons to the bone. All the time I wanted to have him cease to be himself, to see him mask his identity in grease paint and costume. I wanted him to make an effort to keep me on edge by defying me to form a mental photograph of just how he would look when he crossed the threshold of the scene, but he never did. He had established himself as a type, and the type was John Mason. We have a glowing example in the flesh in the person of Mr. John Drew. With Augustine Daly, he played many parts, but in an unguarded moment he displayed his personality in the smashing allure of a dress suit and immediately became known as a dress suit actor, with an irresistible appeal to the votaries of Dame Fashion. Just once he startled us out of the philosophical benevolence with which we have long regarded him. In Jack Straw, I think it was, he appeared for a fleeting moment in whiskers. It seemed incredibly audacious, and it did not last long. He may play a dozen different characters, but he remains true to type, and the type is John Drew. It is this neglect of diversification, forming the very essence of the actor's art, which has been the doom of many of our once highly popular comedians. At a time when they should be in the heyday of their success, they lag forgotten on the scene. Why mention names? The history of musical comedy is teeming with examples. They had comical mannerisms. They squeaked in a way to make you laugh. They tripped over their feet in a manner that was irresistible. It was all very amusing, but they neglected the essential part of their broad and diversified art. They were always themselves and never the character. People at last tired of figures always drawn according to the same pattern. They were stereotypes. If they had played Falstaff, they would have stripped him of all his individuality and replaced it with their own, and for one, I prefer the eccentricity of Falstaff to that of any comedian I know. There is increasing complaint that the theatre of our day is becoming stale and spiritually unprofitable. We see a good deal of acting that is interesting, but a vast deal that is flat, stereotyped, and conventional. A performance like Mr. Barrymore's Colonel Ibbotson at once strikes us by its novelty of graphic vigor and clean-cut outlines. It is a portrait limned by an artist who subordinates his personality to the character, an artist who stands in the presence of art in a devotional attitude. The public unconsciously senses the truth. He is still a young man to play so aged a personage. Only a fortuitous combination of family circumstances is accountable for his essaying the part. He is not the type. 9/10 of our established actors play their parts without the least facial disguise. They are plainly and inevitably themselves, all true to type. So far as it applies to the younger men, acting the roles of heroes, gallants, and lovers, no fault-finding is justified. But the practice extends down into the ranks, filled with players specially selected for their weight, age, color, and complexion, all of whom in a minor degree are acting themselves, projecting their own personality into the picture, and thus rounding out a possibly compact, cohesive performance, but doing little or nothing to raise it out of the rut of technically excellent mediocrity. It is said that we are developing no great actors, and one of the reasons is here indicated. Most of our ambitious young players never arrive at their artistic maturity. They are not given range or opportunity. It is as if a young singer with an undefined voice were assigned perpetually to sing contralto roles in opera, while her true developed tone quality would be that of a soprano, or as if an artist were condemned forever to sketch dainty young society buds, when genius summons him to paint in living colors great episodes of history. Managers look for types because they cannot afford to take chances. but they are to blame, for in exploiting the stage from its commercial side, they have neglected to foster a school in which versatility may be cultivated and developed. With productions in New York verging close upon 200 a season, there can be no time to form a fair appraisal of individual capacity. The man or woman who most nearly approximates in looks and complexion the role to be cast is selected. Yet that which thrills us in acting is not essentially personality so much as spiritual power. Irving had disagreeable mannerisms of speech. Mrs. Fiske has well-known defects. Janauschek in her later years lacked certain physical charms, yet I should like to see Irving's equal in the role of the old veteran of Waterloo, Mrs. Fiske's equal as Becky Sharp, a greater Lady Macbeth than Janauschek. Bernhardt spoke a tongue that few of us understood, but with what rich art she made us forget the fact and understand her every syllable. End of section 8.
Section 9 of Shadowland, November 1919. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Douglas Wood. Shadowland, November 1919, by Various. The Evolution of Jazz, by Lewis Raymond Reid. It is the age of jazz. The war, we'll have to lay it to the war, has brought us syncopated lawlessness. A jumble tumble of emotions finds its expression in weird noises, in blues, Memphis blues, matrimonial blues, Beale Street blues, senatorial blues, actor-manager blues, prohibition blues. And we can thank, or curse if we choose, the Negro. He it was who, with incorrigible sense of gaiety and rhythm, took terpsichore on a toot. The result? She is afflicted with an acute case of delirium tremens. New York has offered a refuge. So has Chicago. So have other cities which audaciously boast an underworld in these piping times of peace and prohibition. Sometimes it appears as if Turpie would never again be invited into a Keeley cure of waltzes and two-steps, so great has been her fall. Yes, indeed, jazz is a hopelessly drunken, reeling thing. It breathes the spirit of the underworld, of that underworld which has almost become legendary in insouciance and youthful vigor. With its irresistible sway, it has restored New York, New Orleans, and San Francisco in the affection of that cynical foreigner who once declared those cities to be the only worthwhile ones in the United States. A broad assumption, it is true, but is it not obvious that this foreigner knew only two classes of people, the gay and the stupid? And surely New York, New Orleans, and San Francisco at one time expressed only the gay. Jazz, no one knows the derivation of the word, had its origin in the African jungles. Savage, monstrously masculine, primitively passionate, it formed an integral part of the Negro's character, just as certain as did his plaintive folk songs that sprang from the cotton plantations and his flashing era of ragtime. With curiously sensual wriggles of the body he danced it. With tom-toms, human bones, and various other noise-making devices he played it. Gradually it crept out of Africa. It made its way via the slave ships to New Orleans, where it definitely established a foothold, stole triumphantly north to Chicago, finding access to the shadowy retreats in the so-called Black Belt, and made its way into the gaudy resorts of New York's Tenderloin. The Negro has done his part. It remained for the white man to take up the burden and capitalize it for the benefit of a jaded world. The latter, with his keener commercial sense, his greater lust for life, his insatiable greed for novelty and excitement, made it a supreme melodic atrocity, a fascinating grotesquerie of noise, a prehistoric combination of innocence and vice. Jazz got the fancy of the young. A world fed up with war and destruction had to offer some freedom, and the relief from high nervous tension was found in dancing wildly and living, as Nietzsche would say, dangerously. Complacent and languorous girls suddenly became wild women. Amiable and respectable fellows suddenly became wild men. And the dance was on, and joy was unrefined. All the while there issued from various elevations noises such as the world had never known before. Every conceivable instrument and device which would give sound, strange and unmelodious, were pressed into service. Barrels, whistles, dishpans, washboards, kettles, bottles, all found a new use as instruments of torture. And if these were not enough, ingenious jazzers performed weird tricks with stage saxophones and ludicrous trombones, even going to the extent of muting the latter with derby hats. And the young, on the way to the draft boards, and the transports and social functions, and shopping tours, experienced a new sensation in their feet, which rapidly spread to the shoulders, arms, chest, and hips. The music of the jazz resurrected the spirit of St. Vitus. People suddenly developed an amazing ability to transform themselves into jelly. Such extraordinary bodily expression attracted sedate dodos who were resting comfortably on the shady side of 60, and lured them away from their monotonous tasks of coupon clipping. They, too, abandoned themselves to the shimmy with pride and eager eye. They would keep up with youth at all costs of dignity and watchfulness over rheumatic joints. Though the leading exponents of jazz are well known, the identity of the original standard-bearer is obscured in mystery. Some of the dance-defying pioneers on the frontiers of respectability who have hewn their way into the innermost recesses of jazzland claim that old John Sprecio of New Orleans is primarily responsible. At any rate, it is certain that he knows all the music of the Negro and can transform it, when necessary, into any kind of inharmonious blues or hesitation. But there are many, many others who have similar accomplishments and who belong in the front rank of jazzers. Bert Kelly was one of the first to invade the North. He concentrated upon Chicago, and it was not long before he and his group of musicians became a sensation of the nightlife there. Walter Kingsley is authority for the statement that the word jazz came into existence at a party which Thomas Megan, the movie star, gave in Chicago to several well-known stage and screen players. Kelly's instrumentalists provided the music, motion pictures were taken of the party, and on the film showing the musicians there was a caption which read, "The band that makes you jazz." Kelly's band eventually made the pilgrimage to Baghdad on the subway, where it was engaged by Frisco to furnish the accompaniment for this amusing and novel representation of toughdom. Incidentally, Frisco should be given credit for his efforts in popularizing jazz. A unique personality, he seemed the living symbol of the fascinating savagery of the underworld. Tipping his derby, and a derby was most essential to the proper expression of the rough and spicy jazz, and violently smoking cigars, tilted at a dangerous angle, he worked his legs into a veritable frenzy of locomotor ataxia. His audiences howled with delight. Here was the real thing at last, they declared. A fig for your parlor prancing and your lounge lizards, who executed soft steps with almost feminine grace and deftness. Here was the rich, red blood, strong and supple limbs, self-satisfied savagery, dancing to the wild, weird music with ever-increasing abandon, because he seemed to embody the physical character of the Barbary Coast. He gained the sobriquet of Frisco. It stuck to him. It helped to make him famous, but back in Dubuque, Iowa, he is known as George Lewis, forming a partnership with Loretta McDermott, a shapely little dancer whom he had met in a Chicago resort. He went to New Orleans, where the couple jazzed to the accompaniment of the darkies. They traveled on to Mobile, back up to Chicago, and thence to New York, where they emerged into undisputed fame and fortune. It is said that the late Vernon Castle gave considerable encouragement to Frisco, advising him of the potent spell which the jazz would have for New York if the dance were capitalized at the psychological moment when the modern cabaret and music hall steps had completely worn out their welcome. One night Frisco and Loretta McDermott appeared in a revue at the Fulton Theater. The show was a failure, but the audience went wild over the dancers, who could be so appealingly primeval. Florenz Ziegfeld, Jr., ever on the alert for the new and novel, engaged them at once for his after-theater show on the roof of the New Amsterdam Theater, and there great and instantaneous success greeted them. Jazz became the order of the night. Vaudeville scouts and cabaret impresarios beckoned to the South for more geniuses of jazz. A golden treasury was promised, for was not the town enthusiastic over something that was new, something that stirred its jaded pulses? Reisenwebers at Columbus Circle engaged the Dixieland Jazz Band, which had scored a big success in Chicago and which boasted a clarinet player who had the uncanny ability to take its instrument to pieces down to the mouthpiece and keep up with the band. This distinction belonged to one Yellow Nunez. This organization played all kinds of blues numbers and eventually got into the courts over a song. And it was during the litigation over the ownership of that number that Nunez, in reply to a question from the court as to the definition of the blues, said, "Judge, blues is blues, a little off-key, but harmony against the rules." The court decided that blues could not be copyrighted inasmuch as they could not be described and orchestrated. Jazz players seem to get most of their effects from cornets and clarinets, perhaps because those instruments lend themselves most easily to imitations. In a number called The Livery Stable Blues, the cornetist of the Dixieland Band even went so far as to introduce the neighing of a horse. A.J. Baquet, born in New Orleans of a Spanish Indian mother and a French father, is said to be the first white jazz clarinet player. He drifted to New York in the fall of 1918 and joined the original New Orleans Jazz Band, playing at various cabarets and restaurants. Edwin Edwards, J. Durante, Frank F. Shotak, Raymond Lopez, who appeared with Blossom Seeley, Tom Brown, Gus Mueller, and Lawrence Shields are other prominent jazzers who paved the way to the present dance delirium. Nor must Ted Lewis be forgotten. Lewis, who incidentally is a great showman, was the first, it is said, to bring subdued tones to the playing of jazz. Just as Frisco has demonstrated what can be done with jazz physically, Lewis has shown what can be done with it instrumentally. He softened its notes, though taking care to maintain its weirdness. Sophie Tucker advances a claim as the originator of jazz on the stage. She declares that she was the first to introduce shoulder shrugs and undulations during the singing of rag songs. When Miss Tucker became a hostess at Reisenwebers, she brought jazz into a conspicuous place on the entertainment program, not only through her efforts, but through those of several young girls, one of whom, Gilda Gray, has been called her protégée. The Schuberts engaged Miss Gray for the Gaieties of 1919, and the opening night of that review was featured by the remarkable jazz and shimmy performance which she gave. It was a new departure in this style of dancing that she offered. Standing in one position and singing with an utterly blank expression, she brought the audience to its feet, for she knew how to be repressed and yet suggestive. The wildness, the indolence, the frankness of the underworld were superlatively symbolized in her performance. Jazz has invaded the Army and Navy, and there are now a number of vaudeville acts composed of soldiers and sailors who saw service in the war, which are devoted to its expression. The mortality list is increasing daily. Musical reviews and comic operas are not complete unless there is some member of their casts who has fallen victim to the jazz. London is in the throes of the epidemic. Paris has accepted it as its own, and all over the United States, jazz has a conspicuous place in amusement circles. Phonograph record cases contain one or more jazz numbers. The orchestras at the dance casinos at various summer resorts include jazz numbers in their nightly repertoire, and the little gathering on the cracker boxes at the Four Corners feel that they are not keeping up with the times unless they jazz a little on the old mouth organ. Indeed, wherever one may gaze or wander, it is a case of all for jazz and jazz for all. End of section 9.
Section 10 of Shadowland, November 1919. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Shadowland, November 1919, by Various. Death in Fever Flat, by George W. Cronin. Cast List. Stage directions, read by Winnifred Assmann.
Voice 1, read by Rapunzelina.
Voice 2, read by ShrimpPhish. Harvey Mace, read by Richard Saunders.
Hank, read by Christopher Boswell.
Stage Driver, read by Jim Hedrick.
Patty, by Catherine Seelster.
Lon Purdy, read by Douglas Wood.
Scene: in the great far west, i.e., far from the movie west. The time is the present, about 11 p.m. This is not a Bret Harte play, nor is it designed for W.S. Harte, and it should be performed with none of that customary and spacious braggadocio of Western plays.
Pitch into her, boys. Tune up your gullets.
With quivering bathos.
She was born in old Kentucky.
Oh, shut up! That's moldy! Gives that Tennessee warble, Hank.
When your heart was mine, true love, and your head lay on my breast, you could make me believe by the falling of your arm that the sun rose up in the west.
There is a momentary pause, filled in by,
You oughter go courting with that throat of yourn, Hank.
Harvey, as in misanthrope.
Oh, women.
During the laugh that follows, an auto horn blares outside, and a bright shaft is visible through the rear windows.
Stages come! Stages come!
There are sounds indicating the rapid evacuation of the bar, and a moment later one of the rear doors is jerked open and the stage driver enters, dragging in 2 heavy suitcases, which he deposits near the small table with appropriate grunts, meanwhile encouraging the passengers to enter.
Ugh, purty lumpy bags. Come in, folks, come in. Seems like you might be carrying all your belongings.
The 2 passengers enter. The man, quickly, nervously, almost furtively. The woman, with that weariness which ignores everything except its own condition.
Come in and set, lady. Don't be scared. Looks a little spooky, but Hank'll have a glim for ye in 2 shakes.
Places a chair for her.
Here, I know you're plumb tuckered. Make yourself to home.
Looking around at the drear surroundings.
So fur you're able.
I thought the stage went through to Holloway tonight.
Well, sir, she do, if she do, but this time she don't. I've been having to run 10 miles on low already, and I just don't dast take her across that 30 miles of sand the way she is. She'll drink water like a thusty hoss, and like as not lay down and die on us halfway out. Then where'd we be? No, sir. You folks'll just have to camp here at Fever Flat till I can do a tinkering job tomorrow morning. So I'll step into the bar and tell Hank you're here.
At the door to the bar.
Hank'll do the best he can for ye. He's a square man. Good night to you.
Goes out, leaving door half open.
Good night.
Looking about.
What a hole. Like somebody died here and they'd gone off and left it all stand just the way it was.
He goes to the open door at the rear and stares at the naked moonlit buttes.
Them hills gets my goat. They're nothing but blithering skeletons. And this bunch of shacks they call Fever Flats looks more like no more'n a damn boneyard to me.
Shutting the door.
Ugh, it's cold in here. Feel like I was sitting on my own grave's edge.
Paddy, scarcely raising her head and speaking with no emotion in a dead, dry voice.
You didn't used to be so pernickety when you was punching on the range lawn.
And you didn't used to look like a hag neither, Patty.
Paddy, with a momentary flash.
Drink's poisoning your tongue, too.
Who's drinking? Can't I take a thimbleful now and then without all this jawing?
You ain't taking thimbles. You're just soaking it up. You'll be getting snakes if you keep on. And then what'll I do?
Resuming her air of weary indifference.
Not that I care so much what you do with yourself, or what becomes of me. Nothing matters.
There you go, actin' abused. How about my rights and pleasures? Ain't got none, I suppose.
Oh, shut up. You make me sick.
Hank enters, a ruddy, vigorous young man, strangely out of place among all this rubbish. He wears a barkeeper's apron and speaks cordially.
How do you do, folks? How do you do? Well, this is a kind of rough layout for y'all. You see, the stage is due here at 5 and stops for grub, then makes hollow eye by about 9, but here 'tis.
Pulls out watch.
Half an hour of midnight, and I suppose you ain't ate yet, eh?
Hank lights the glass lamp.
Thanks. We've had sandwiches, but maybe my husband's like something.
Wet?
Paddy shrugs indifferently and fixes her hair. As she turns toward Hank, the light for the first time falls full on his face. Paddy stares fixedly at him and half rises with a little cry. Lon, with a quick, startled glance at Hank, speaks to her in a sharp, threatening voice.
Patty, sit down. Are you getting plumb loco driving out so late in automobiles?
To Hank apologetically.
You kind of flustered us, mister, 'cause you have little a look of a friend of ourn that died suddent. Mournful case. Pardner of mine. No, you're not much like. He was tall, heavy-built, and lighter complected. Must have been considerable older, too.
Paddy, almost in a whisper.
No.
Older, I say. My wife's kind of wrought up by this here little spell of traveling.
Oh, you're not used to it, eh?
We've been at it years.
That is off and on, my dear, only off and on.
All the time.
Hank, trying to be a little jocose to break the oppressive atmosphere.
Should think you might hanker after your own nest, lady.
Paddy, rising rudely.
Well, just keep your thoughts.
Hank, completely abashed.
Yes, ma'am. Your room is just at the top of the landing. I'll make you a light.
He hustles away upstairs to cover his embarrassment, taking the suitcases with him.
You're always trying to belittle me in public. Is that any way for a wife to act? I want to know.
What do you always lie so for?
Lon, with rising voice.
That's my business, and I'll do as I damn please. And don't you go too far crossing me. I won't stand it. Some day I'll up and...
Beat me. That's all that's left to you, wife-beater.
Lon raises his hand as though to strike her, but lets it fall as Hank reappears on the landing.
Excuse me, ma'am. Have you your own towels by you? Ourn is pretty scaly. It's so long since we've had in women folks, at least ladies.
Paddy, moving toward the stairs.
Thanks, we have some.
Lon to Paddy as Hank, hidden from the audience, descends.
You might as well be decent, Patty. You ain't got none other but me.
Yes, you've took me from 'em. We've been traipsin' and traipsin' till I'm plumb sick. Yes, I'm.
Her voice breaks and she runs blindly toward the stairs, almost into the arms of Hank, which further increases his consternation. Hank, holding her off.
Steady, steady. There's the ladder, ma'am. Can't I fetch you something? Toddy?
Paddy shakes her head, runs up and slams her door.
Women folks is curious. Curious.
Take my advice and keep free of 'em.
It was a woman did for my brother.
Oh, you got a brother, eh?
Had.
Where is he?
Down at Laguna Madre, Arizona.
Lon, leaning forward and gripping the edge of the table.
Ranchin'?
Buried.
How? What were you saying about a woman?
A woman done for 'em. That's what they said. I don't know. I didn't get there for a long time. There was a mix-up.
Well, well, that's strange.
I suppose you heard of it? It was all in the papers. It even got as far as Denver.
No, I don't remember, but I've read of similar cases.
You've been in Arizona, I suppose?
No, not quite. I've been all around them parts, but never in Arizona.
'Tain't what you'd call a pretty country, but it's mighty satisfying. Too blame cold up here.
Why don't you move?
I'm going to, but you see, my brother had half interest in this here tavern, and there was some litigation about it. Case is just finished. I've been here 3 years, ever since he went. But I'm pulling my stakes, you bet. I wouldn't be buried here, would you?
I'd rather not.
So she took me for a friend that's croaked, eh? That's curious.
Eh? What's that? Who?
Your wife.
Oh, yes. Well, he was a good 10 years older, and dark-complected.
Thought you said he was light.
Maybe I did. Well, he might have been a trifle lighter than you, but then size him up by the average, he was dark. Let's forget him. Bring us a bottle of your best, and see that the glass is clean.
To be sure.
Hank goes out. Lon sits with his head between his hands, brooding. The voice of Hank rises from the bar, rendering the second voice of the Tennessee warble.
There's many a girl can go all round about and hear the small birds sing, and many a girl that stays at home alone and rocks the cradle and spins.
As the song ends, the door at the rear opens soundlessly, revealing the vast expanse of moonlit plains and desolate buttes. Lon shivers and turns up his coat collar, finally facing about to discover the cause of the chill. Observing the open door, he goes to it, closes it, and locks it, the click of the key being distinctly audible. He then returns and sits as before, and again the song comes.
There's many a star shall jangle in the west. There's many a leaf below. There's many a dam that will light upon the man for treating a poor girl so.
Now, both of the double doors swing open, without sound. Lon shivers, then, looking over his shoulder, suddenly gets up, glares about him, and makes hastily for the door to the bar, where he almost collides with Hank, entering with bottle and glass.
Here, mister, I was just coming.
What the devil's the matter with your doors?
Them? Oh, the lock's no good. When the wind's southwest, they fly right open. Gotta be wedged with a shingle.
He goes over to the doors, slams them shut, picks up a shingle from the floor, and inserts firmly between them. Lon, relieved.
Well, that's all right.
Now it's blame curious the way the old place gets. You'll hear those floorboards creak at times like as if someone's sneaking over 'em barefoot. Feller told me once it was made by contraption and temperature. Maybe so, but I reckon there's more goes on around here than we give credit for.
Hank dusts off table and puts bottle and glass down. Lon seizes them eagerly and begins drinking. Lon, after a couple of glasses.
You mean spirits?
Well, I don't know as you'd call 'em that, but it's a fact there's more liquor goes over the bar than gets paid for. 'Tain't stole either. It just goes. As old Peter Gunderson used to say, I'm a hell of a thirsty person, and when I croak, I'll be a hell of a thirsty spirit. I sometimes wonder.
Paddy appears above, in a loose dressing sack, her hair hanging in a great wavy mass, and holding a pitcher.
Lon, please fetch some water.
Lon, not moving.
I don't dare go out in the night. I've caught a chill from today's drive.
Hank, going up the stairs.
I'll fetch it you, ma'am.
She comes down to meet him, and the two are momentarily hidden from the audience. Lon continues to drink steadily, pouring down one glass after another. Hank reappears, treading with a certain gaiety, and goes out rear, whistling the Tennessee warble. Paddy, leaning out of the shadow of the stairway toward her husband.
Ain't you coming up soon, Lon?
Lon, ignoring the query.
Scarcely no resemblance whatever.
You lie.
She ascends to the top of the landing. Outside, a pump creaks dismally.
You'll be seeing things, Lon, if you keep it up.
Lon, rising perfectly steady.
Mind your business. Wish to hell I had a newspaper.
He goes out through the door to the bar, while Paddy runs a comb reflectively through the exuberant tumult of her dark hair. Hank enters and stops a moment, half blinded by the light, then looks up and, shading his eyes, smiles. Paddy, coyly.
Is the light in your eyes, mister?
It's you, ma'am, are blinding them.
He runs up the stairs with the picture. Paddy, bending toward him as he comes near the top steps.
You'd better reach it to me. Maybe the land'll not hold the two of us.
It'll hold two that have such light hearts as we.
Ah, you don't know mine, mister.
Hank, reaching her the pitcher.
There, the clumsy mutt I am, spilt the cold water on your pretty bare toes.
As she leans over to take the pitcher, her hair falls suddenly about his head, almost covering his face. Paddy, drawing it back with a deft twirl.
I've most smothered you.
I wouldn't want a sweeter death.
Paddy, looking down into his eyes.
Indeed, you're the picture of an old lover of mine.
I'd rather be the picture of the new.
He makes as if to clasp her about the ankles, but she puts a hand on his shoulder and pushes him gently back.
You've been very kind to a wanderer from Arizona. Don't spoil it. Good night.
Hank turns about, mutters.
Good night.
He clatters loudly down the stairs as Lon re-enters, studying a newspaper. Lon seats himself, still absorbed. Hank favors him with a glare of positive hatred. Hank with a sneer.
All fixed for the night, eh?
Lon, grunting.
Good night.
Well, I hope you like this country better'n Arizona.
Lon, starting out of the news.
The hell you say?
Your wife was wishing herself back there.
Lon, settling back to his paper and bottle.
Well, that's where she come from. I don't. Women always want what they ain't got.
Hank, retiring.
When your heart was my true love, and your head lay on my breast.
He goes out, closing the door.
You could make me believe by the falling of your arm that the sun rose in the west.
During the singing of this last stanza, the double doors swing wide as before, revealing a figure standing motionless outside, bathed in moonlight. At the same time, the flame in the glass lamp begins to flicker and wane. Lon holds the paper closer to his face, finally almost buries his nose in it, as if conscious of the presence, but stubbornly resolved to ignore it. The figure moves, and as it crosses the threshold, the feeble light expires. Lon, however, still sits as if absorbed in the newspaper, pretending to sip from his glass. The figure, in a thin, mocking voice, echoes the song of the other, standing just behind Lon's chair, a thin echo.
You could make me believe, by the falling of your arm, that the sun rose up in the west.
Lon picks up the soiled pack of cards from the table and begins to shuffle them mechanically, nor does he once turn toward the apparition. Lon, in a hoarse whisper.
And what are you doing here?
The figure sits down nonchalantly in a chair a little to one side of Lon's. He is dressed in the Western style, that is, without style, corduroys, heavy boots, flannel shirt. In fact, he looks almost natural. But there is a curious dark mark in the center of his forehead. Or is it a round dark hole? Lon, petulantly.
Can't you stay where you was put, with a heap o' rocks on top of ye?
Can't seem to give up the old habits, you know.
Lon, thickly, tossing the pack down.
What the hell's a corpse got to do with habits?
You poor fool, you'll learn when you come over.
Come over whar?
Where I be.
Harvey sings in a quavering voice.
There's many a girl can go all round about and hear small birds sing.
Lon, snarling.
Dry up on them corpse tunes of yourn, Harvey Mace.
Oh, you recognize me, huh? You recognize your old friend and partner, do you, Lon Purdy?
Lon, sullenly.
I knowed you'd come.
And you believe in me, huh? Well, that's good, too.
Believe? Well, I knowed I'd be seeing things soon, what with the booze. I knowed it'd be the snakes or you. Patty told me I'd be seeing things.
So you believe in her, anyway. Well, how's Paddy? And the children?
You know damn well we ain't had none.
What, no children? How unfortunate. The house of love not to be graced with fruit. Sterile, sterile.
Are you referring to me?
To your spiritual union only, my friend. Physically, I know, nothing was wanting for a perfect match. A female form divine to mate with bit-blonde beast. A race of super people.
What the hell are you gabbing? You allus had a lot of talky-talk. That's what made a hit with Patty before
the other man came along and cut us both out.
Harvey sings.
And many a girl that stays at home alone and rocks the cradle and spins. Yes, I'm afraid we both stood up pretty poorly alongside him. I had the words, the brain, the ideas. I could charm her, tantalize her, quicken her mind, arouse her imagination. That's why I cut you out with her.
Lon, sneering.
Gab.
Yes, Gab. It was one better to her than mere brute, guts. You personified strength. You didn't have nerves enough to be afraid of anything. You had endurance, cheek, deviltry, that kind of raw good nature. These took with the gay, immature girl she was until I came. You had guts. I had Gab.
And the other feller?
He had the gift.
What do you mean?
He was a full man. His personality exuded from him like incense. It wrapped and enfolded you and warmed you. And yet it was not a grain feminine, but deeply, proudly masculine. You tolerated him. I loved him. I had the fine passion for Paddy, but when I first saw the two of them together, I knew she was his. Or
With a keen, stern look at Lon.
Ought to be. And she has been. Always.
Lon, jumping to his feet and knocking over his chair.
You lie like hell. She's mine. She's been mine all these 3 years. I won her, and I own her. What little of love she ever had for you or him is buried down in Laguna Madre with the bones of ye. And all hell can't take her from me.
Harvey, rising tall and pale.
He can, and he's done it. You thought you'd got her, but he's had her, or rather, she's had him, in her heart, ever since they took the rope from his neck and pronounced him legally dead and justice vindicated and laid him away in the desert. All that time since, he's belonged to her. When you laid by her side nights, it was his arm she felt about her waist, not yours. His breath was on her cheek, and his heart was beating against hers. Oh, you poor, poor fool.
Lon, throwing his glass straight at the ghost.
You lying pup.
Harvey, bursting into a gale of eerie laughter.
Ha, ha, ha! You poor fool. Now you believe in me.
Lon whips out his revolver and aims at the ghost, then slowly returns it to the holster as he realizes the futility of the move.
Go on, my boy. Let's have another one here.
He points to the dark hole in his forehead. Lon, wiping his own face with the back of his hand and shuddering, slumps down into his seat and stares vacantly at the table.
Do you remember the last time you pulled that trick? What a foxy one it was. How astutely placed, planned, my friend. I remember when we two went up the canyon together. Just such a shining night as this. I asked you why you'd borrowed the other man's horse, and you said yours was a little lame. Oh, excellent dissembler, most crafty of liars, you stole that horse. You stole that horse to put a rope around the other man's neck. You knew the Pinto was shod different from any pony in those parts. You knew where they'd track him to when they found the job you'd done. Then we sat down to smoke some cards, and I remember the curious glitter in your eyes. I was dealing.
The ghost shuffles the cards on the table, then lays down the pack in front of Lon.
Cut.
Lon mechanically obeys. Harvey dealing.
And after several hands, you brought up the subject of Paddy. And I told you I was out of the race, and that you'd better get out too, because the best man already had her. And then I sensed you were going to draw. And when I had my gun out, it was empty. Clever boy. You had it fixed right, and so you plugged me square. And the moon and the stars went out for me, and I dropped into the black gulf.
Lon, throwing his hand down, buries his face in his hands, groaning.
You left me with my face to the stars for the coyotes to find. Then, very coolly, you turned the other man's horse toward home and sent him off cracking. And you jumped to a pinon log that led off to a ledge of lava where your footprints wouldn't show. And you turned up in half an hour with the boys in town. Then you inquired casually where the other man was. You knew, you devil. You knew they'd never get an alibi from him for that night, 'cause Paddy was with him. Paddy had her dear arms around his neck while you, clever dog, were out fixing to put a rope there. And you done it, too. Won her? Yes, you did, like hell. After the trial was over and the dead buried me and him, you passed a dirty whisper around town about her and then married her to save her good name, and that's how you won her.
There is an immense silence, broken only by the heavy breathing of Lon, which comes in rattling gasps. Harvey sings.
There's many a star shall jangle in the west. There's many a leaf below. There's many a dam that will light upon the man for treating the poor girl so. But I ain't forgot all you done for me. Neither has the other man. And he's come to settle too.
Lon, staggering up.
No, I don't believe in you. You're nothing at all. There ain't no.
Lon sways and catches at the table. As he swings around, the figure of another stands outside the door. A tall figure with something white twisted about its neck. Lon, with a cry of horror, puts out his arms as if to ward off the apparition, and backs slowly toward the left wall. Harvey coming toward him.
Murderer! Betrayer! We've come to settle.
Lon, screaming.
No, 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 I don't believe.
He falls, and the pile of rubbishy furniture topples over onto him with a crash. The two apparitions vanish. The door to the bar is flung open, and Hank leaps in, at the same moment that Paddy appears above, whitely clad.
Lon! Lon! What's the matter?
Hank, going toward the pile of stuff.
Go back. It's something terrible.
He heaves the heavy pieces from the body and drags it out as Paddy, with a long cry, flies down the stairs. He feels the breast quickly and rises before Paddy reaches the table.
I'm afraid he's done for.
Oh.
He must have fell.
I knew drink would do for him.
Did you love him so much?
Once. A little.
With sudden, fierce joy.
I don't care. Now I can live.
Hank, looking out over the desert where the dawn begins to show.
Both of us.
Curtain. End of section 10.
Section 11 of Shadowland, November 1919. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Laura Luchsinger. Shadowland, November 1919, by Various. What Every Woman Should Know, by the Rambler. The world is so full of a number of things, I'm sure we should all be as happy as kings, mused Milady as she strolled down the greatest avenue in the world, past the wonderful fashion marts and through the side streets, past the smaller but also smart shops, pausing frequently to marvel at the tempting array of everything dear to the feminine heart, so artistically displayed in the big windows. The world is so full of a number of things, she thought again, but happy as kings? Well, kings should be happy. For one thing, they don't have to worry about fashions, wearing as they do always the same kingly garb, crowns included, season after season. But how can a woman be happy when she contemplates such a bewildering display of fashions, all so inconsistently different, contradicting one another, as it were, right before one's eyes? Such a number of things, indeed. And Milady is right. Individualism is the cry of the age, and individualism in dress is one of the results. We hear of the new silhouette, and we see it demonstrated in voluminous overskirts, double hip pockets, gracefully draped in beflounced frocks, skirts with ruffles and frills. And then we turn to observe a slim figure swathed so tightly in velvet or satin that she can hardly put one foot before the other, and on every side we see the one-piece gown of slender lines. When all these modes are unmistakably in the fashion, how can any one silhouette be said to be the mode? The most noticeable feature of the present-day mode is its catholicity, and there can be no distinctively new silhouette, nor is any new novelty of design a possibility. Small wonder Milady is bewildered at the apparent inconsistencies of present-day fashions. The fact has been accepted among artists that every woman is a distinct type belonging to some period in history, and now the world of fashion is recognizing it and has finally decreed that instead of setting up a few standard styles and demanding that all types wear practically the same modes, there shall be a wide enough range of styles to cover every period of history and every type and enable every woman to find the most becoming attire. Every woman's problem, then, is to classify herself. In short, let Milady hie herself to the mirror, study the reflection there, and decide upon her type. The rest is exceedingly simple, as a tour of the shops will show. In the exclusive Fifth Avenue and smaller establishments, we find not only fashions belonging to a particular period, but fashions echoing all the little details that characterize them as belonging to a particular type. For the piquant woman with dainty coloring, the Dresden shepherdess type, the models show the soft clinging lines of the Renaissance period with lovely effects achieved in satins and soft flexible silks, draperies that assume the shape of panniers, and the blouse which is in one piece with the girdle with surplice, closing, quaint and becoming. For afternoon and evening wear, the Dresden shepherdess type of model displays gowns of dainty tints and fabrics, ruffled taffetas and lace berthas, airy nets with ribbon trimmings, delicate crepes and chiffons with flowing lace sleeves. One model wore a hat with picturesquely drooping brim with black and pastel shades. Another, a chic round velvet turban with an irrepressible spray of feathers, and a very young girl was particularly alluring in a poke bonnet of draped velvet such as grandmother wore. Capes maintain their tremendous vogue, and an afternoon and evening cape of taupe velvet with fur collar charmingly accommodated the fuller skirts affected by these models, while a motor or traveling coat of homespun with novel yoke and sleeves and muffler collar was at hand for utility wear. For Milady of Oriental beauty, there are the brightest of colors, the richest of fabrics, a gay commingling of colors, and the glimmer of metals and brocades. The daytime dresses worn by models representing this type are more or less straight but elaborate with embroidery, braid, and other trimmings. For formal afternoon wear, there is a gown of black velvet with a front tablier of brocaded velvet weighted with gold and jet fringe, and girdle of gold metal with gold tassels. The velvet is draped from the left shoulder where it is caught by a gold buckle. The gowns for evening wear are built along clinging lines and graceful curves and, carrying out the idea that this type of woman depends upon the quality of fabric and bizarre ornamentation to achieve the proper degree of elegance, the effect is one of almost barbaric splendor. Fanciful effects are noticed too in her wraps and furs, sumptuous garments, shapeless almost in cut, or luxurious brocades, supple velvets and fleecy duvetins with colorful linings. But it is with her hats especially that Milady of Oriental beauty comes into her own. One model displayed a millinery triumph of splendid brocade with lining of Chinese royal blue taffeta, a narrow edge of black Chantilly lace, and a blue and silver ribbon round the crown. Another was of black velvet with rose and silver lining, and a rose and blue ostrich falling into cascades of graceful spray. Dost see the picture? And there is the prim Priscilla, the demure stately beauty, belonging to the days when lovers sang sentimentally the Spanish cavalier, "I'll hang my harp on a weeping willow tree." She does not hope to achieve the exquisite loveliness of the Dresden shepherdess lady, nor the colorful splendor of the Oriental beauty, but she combines the charm and sauciness of today with the dignity belonging to Queen Victoria's early reign, and the result is inimitable. For the edification of this alluring type of femininity, one model wears a dress of heavy satin with wide hip fullness and so much depth that the sides take on a pannier aspect. The waist is merely a fitted straight bodice with square open neck and sleeves that do not reach below the elbow. A quaint afternoon frock is of morning glory silk with draped tunic and draped lace fichu. Lace forms the vest and ends of the flowing sleeves beneath which are fitted and buttoned oversleeves of sheer fabric. Another formal frock is of soft pink taffeta with graduated flounces of lace about the rather full skirt, narrower ruffles of lace outlining the bib front of the bodice, short puff sleeves with lace ruffles and pink sash. So reminiscent were these frocks of "When Grandma Was a Girl" that we were not surprised to see that the models wearing these gowns wore early Victorian coiffures with earrings to match, and carried the small beaded and bouffant bags that Victorian ladies knew as reticules. There is a noticeable return, too, to furs of Grandmother's day, and the little Victorian lady of today may find herself wearing a becoming coat or cape combination of sable and mink. With these quaint creations, the returned picture hat, with its graceful drooping brim and swirl of paradise feathers, is singularly fitting and becoming. For the businesswoman and the woman who affects the tailored type of dress, there is a deal of diversity in the styles apart from the strictly mannish kind that are characterized by smart simplicity and exquisite tailoring. This season, suits have taken to masquerading. Some of the suits have various modes of camouflage which make them appear like dresses, while some of the frocks look like coats. Coats, too, have turned into garments that are half coat and the other half cape. Coat-like frocks give their wearers a trim, well-dressed appearance, and for that reason will be extremely popular. This type of costume has been dear to the heart of the French woman and is now being universally adopted by the American woman, who so long have favored the tailor-made suit for street wear. Each season, however, sees a further departure from the suit. We have come to realize that we are never well dressed in a blouse and skirt after removing the jacket of a suit. One of these new coat dresses takes the place of either a suit or a lightweight topcoat on mild autumn days, and one may go to business, shop, lunch, or even dine with the feeling of being well dressed. Generally speaking, the business or tailored woman will cling to the type of dress that is trim, smart, and sensible. She will not wear trailing skirts, uncomfortably full ones, nor yet the unreasonably short frocks affected by French women. Coats of the new tailleurs are much longer than those of last year. Many of them are 3/4 length, although some are even longer than this. Fullness does not appear in the back, No matter how flaring the sides may be, the back of the jacket must be without fullness. For the lover of the separate blouse, the choice of meteor for blouse material is extremely practical. Brown and raspberry shades are especially attractive. The short sleeve, which ends just above the elbow or merely covers it, is preferred for over blouses, the necks of which are high in the back but show a rounded opening at the front. These blouses are effective with separate modish skirts. For the street suit, duvetyn is combined with chiffon or georgette crepe with pleasing effect. Matching suit shades come as heretofore in georgette, but made up with color contrast and underlays of flame, coral pink, pearl gray, and French blue. Both low and high neck styles are designed, but the low cuts receive greatest favor. Surprising versatility is shown, too, in Milady's footwear. It was only recently that the leading modistes saw the wonderful results obtained by selecting well-fitting footwear in shades to blend with the costume. There is nothing revolutionary in the idea. It is a lesson we should have learned from nature long ago. Master minds in the Great World War grasped and profited by this lesson of nature and called it camouflage, which is simply the art of blending objects into a background to make them inconspicuous. Hats, wraps, and gowns are important, of course, but shoes determine every woman's confidence in her costume. Hence the awakening to the importance of color harmony, smart lines, and efficient comfort in modish footwear. Kid skin is the chosen leather because it melds smoothly to the foot and ankle and lends itself perfectly to the fashionable colorings that women seek. A good-looking walking boot that pleases all classes of women because it combines a sense of the smartness so much desired with comfortable ease is of soft-dressed kid with trim, high-cut lace top, Cuban heel, and flexible turned sole. And, while we hear rumors of a nationwide campaign against the high heel, the eternal feminine still loves and wears the slim, graceful walking boot, the trim pump, the gay, carefree dancing slippers with smart Lewis heels. And so, strolling down the avenue and through the big stores with their bewildering display of beauty and fashion, Milady learns a number of things. She looks about and sees costumes inspired by all countries and ages, a fascinating jumble of all the feminine fashions since the modern world began. A veritable upheaval of traditions in costuming has characterized the interval since the war was over, but let us not imagine that it reflects an attitude of unrest and uncertainty, but that it expresses a constructive effort toward well-regulated progress in the fine art of dress. End of Section 11.
Section 12 of Shadowland, November 1919. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by ShrimpPhish. Shadowland, November 1919, by Various. The new season dawns reluctantly, by The Critic. The great actors' war is over, peace is here, and new productions are as thick as returned officers with medals. While it lasted, the players' strike was altogether a happy event. Broadway was ghastly dark after sunset. Its electric nightlife, for instance, consisted wholly of a chewing gum advertisement and the usual Selznick movie signs on every other corner. Otherwise, that is, Broadway was dark. Dramatic critics could be observed romping merrily along the streets, as light-hearted as when they were boys. Now and then they wrote caustic pieces for their papers on the decadent movies. The streets were jammed with actors. Stars who weren't entertaining the proletariat on the sidewalks were giving benefits at the Lexington Opera House and in other hastily secured theaters. One or two non-equity productions managed to weather the strike of scene shifters, electricians, and mere actors, but with sadly upset casts. Managers began to play roles themselves. George M. Cohan did a barber in his Royal Vagabond, and William A. Broad histrionized as a butler in his At 9:45. Folks you never suspected would or could act began to do the former. Just when the whole thing was at its merry height, the strike ended. Pleasantly for all sides, apparently. Managers returned shrinkingly to their private offices. Dramatic critics again began coming late to the theater with bored but resigned expressions, and the avalanche of new season plays got underway. The season is still in a sort of incoherent state, yet a few productions are already raising their heads above the surface. For instance, there's Booth Tarkington's comedy, Clarence. After reading the eulogies of the New York critics, we sort of gained the vague impression that the great American comedy had arrived. But Clarence didn't knock us wholly off our feet. Nicely amusing it is and all that, but not the whirlwind the critics paint it. Of course, we saw it under rather unhappy circumstances. We sat in the last row of the orchestra while a middle-aged ingenue with curls and catarrh occupied standing room just back of our right ear. All this rather cramped Mr. Tarkington's subtleties for us. Clarence, however, is funny. Bully in places. Tarkington has built it around the way a returned soldier straightens out a distraught but typically American household. Clarence isn't a philosopher or anything like that, but just an awkward private the draft had accorded the post of driving army mules. Clarence, as splendidly played by Alfred Lunt, lies sort of midway between Ed Wynne and Charlie Ray. Clarence is a remarkable character, but also are two others, the son and daughter of the household, wonderfully drawn by the understanding Tarkington and wonderfully played by Glenn Hunter and Helen Hayes. Hunter's adolescent Bobby Wheeler is a gem, a glorious presentation of that awful cocoon period of boyhood. Sam Benelli's cheery little tragedy, The Jest, has been revived with John and Lionel Barrymore in their roles of last season. To our way of thinking, the Barrymores easily lead the American histrionic profession. It is rather of late date to comment upon Benelli's piquant study of rape, murder, and insanity in the festive Middle Ages. If you are planning vengeance upon your landlord, for instance, we recommend The Jest, for this tragedy sets out to present the triumph of mind over matter. John Barrymore plays a cringing coward who has been browbeaten all his life by a big, noisy mercenary. After he loses the fair daughter of the neighborhood fishmonger by force, he sets out to get evening. And he does. He does! The tragedy has sweep, power, and grip. The splendid acting of the Barrymores is beyond praise. If there is anything better than John's high-keyed playing of the cowardly painter Gianetto, it is Lionel's vivid presentation of the swashbuckling Neri, and vice versa. Maud Hannaford may be dramatically inadequate as the fishmonger's golden-haired offspring, but she presents a seductive picture of Florentine beauty. Scandal, Cosmo Hamilton's racy comedy, seems likely to interest New York for a while, despite the fact that it pleased Chicago. Scandal is another of those deliberate dramatic blush constructors. Beatrix Vanderdyke, a typically snippy stories flapper, becomes involved in a difficult situation and lies her way out of it by declaring that she is married to a wealthy yachtsman. He aids her scheme, but when the flapper's happy family arrange a hasty honeymoon, demands the rights of a husband as a lesson to the ingenue. This takes place in the flapper's pink boudoir and is calculated to set the callow folks out front blushing. But the one real flash of scandal comes in the last act, when Hamilton stops trying to achieve a daring situation. Scandal will please those who take Robert W. Chambers seriously. It is rather well done by Charles Cherry, well-mannered, though elderly, as the pseudo-husband, and pretty Francine Larrymore as the devilish Vanderdyke person. Miss Larrymore has a fearful voice, but her piquant personality surmounts that handicap, and she is growing in ability to hold up a scene. There are lots and lots of other things on Broadway. Consider the Schubert Late Summer Show, The Gaieties of 1919, We rather liked this in its first edition with the noisy but amusing Ed Wynne. After the strike, it was represented with a new cast headed by Nora Bayes. The second company did not equal the first, although Gilda Gray, exponent of the shimmy and feminine Quaker deluxe, is still present. Gilda is unforgettable. We will never be able to shake off our memories of her. The Gaieties had one haunting little melody, The Vamp. Mystery, Marriage, Murder, reads the advertisement of At 9:45, which is an Owen Davis melodrama, one of those things that keep you guessing who is the real culprit until the last curtain. That is, it is supposed to. We guessed in the middle of the first act, and guessed right. For fear that you will consider us conceited, we'll explain our process. We simply eliminate all the characters upon whom Mr. Davis carefully showered suspicion. Someday a playwright is going to try this in reverse, and make a fortune. At 9:45 has interest, however, if you like this sort of thing. The leading woman, Marie Goff, is a distinctly pleasant new personality. Just now we can't recall much about Lou Field's A Lonely Romeo, except a scene in a man's hat shop. We suspect that the libretto of George White's Scandals of 1919 was written by a dancer. The thing is just a series of terpsichorean interludes, most of them serving to keep up your courage while you wait for little Anne Pennington to reappear. Anne is still our favorite example of condensed seductiveness. She is quite as appealing as ever. The new Hippodrome entertainment is up to standard. They are taking a leaf from the Max Sennett ledger and playing up the bathing cuties and diving nymphs. One young woman, May Eccleston, does a sensation dive from the top of the huge hippodrome into the big tank. Returning for a moment to the late-lamented strike, let us comment upon the interesting performances given by the striking actors at the Lexington Opera House. A scene from Camille, done by Ethel and Lionel Barrymore and Conway Turrell, will stick in our memories for a long time to come. Lionel's portrayal of the father is a remarkable bit of work and a masterly example of makeup, while Ethel, seemingly 10 years younger in her new slenderness, now and then is struck a moving and poignant moment as the ill-fated heroine. More anon. End of section 12.
Section 13 of Shadowland, November 1919. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Winnifred Assmann. Shadowland, November 1919, by Various. Fair and Warmer, by Gladys Hall. If Billy Bartlett hadn't been wallowing about in the last yellow rim of what he might have termed hell, if he had been that kind of a man, it might have occurred to him as an enormity that he was spending an evening alone with a woman. He might have included it in the category of things not quite nice, for Billy Bartlett was essentially nice. Nobody ever disputed that indisputable fact, not even his wife. Billy Bartlett had been sort of miserable for quite some months. He had been vaguely miserable since the first night Laura had not run to meet him on his return from the office, had not hurtled herself into his all-too-receptive arms, had not muttered unintelligible nothings into his ear. A dull ache had started on that night. The dull ache had persisted. It had grown to chronic violence when Laura remarked, during the course of that inexplicable evening, that she had run into Philip Evans, and he had taken her to tea. She had added, defensively, that there was no harm in that, as she could see. Billy knew vaguely that there was a great deal of harm in Philip Evans. He had heard tales, at clubs and elsewhere, confirmatory ones. He had seen things with his own eyes. And then there was the hurting fact that Laura had been engaged to Philip Evans before she did him, Billy, the ecstatic honor of preferring him. Philip was impossible, she confided to Billy once. on their honeymoon. He flirted with anything and everything, black, white, or yellow, so long as the creature wore skirts. It was altogether abominable. Now, it seemed, the promiscuous Philip was turning his eyes in the direction of Billy Bartlett's Laura, and Billy Bartlett's Laura did not appear to remember the term abominable. And so things had drifted wretchedly along for Billy, and thrillingly it seemed for Laura, until this hideous night. They had been dining together in their usual strained silence, and Billy had reminded Laura that the Jack Wheelers from the apartment above were coming in later for bridge. Laura had flushed to an instantaneous and bewildering red. She had said, almost angrily, that Billy was purposely obtuse, purposely torturing her, that he knew she was dated for the opera with Phil, and that she couldn't and wouldn't hurt Phil's feelings by an 11th-hour refusal. Billy thought silently that some people's feelings were always being swathed in cotton wool, while his, he shivered, and said that the nights were growing cool. Laura seemed to feel a need to rush on. She said a lot of unpleasant things. She said that Billy was cruel, that he was blind, and also, and many times, she said that he was stupid and duller than the proverbial dishwater. She compared Billy to a great many things relative to dishwater. She asked Billy what he meant anyway, and didn't he suppose she wanted any life just because she had gone and married him? Didn't he? Was a tomb to be her portion with a corpse that never even walked? She finished up by demanding that he give her a divorce, her freedom, her soul again. Billy's white face reflected his stricken soul. He pinched himself to find out if this thing were true. He pinched hard, and he remained in the same sick state. It was true, then. He realized, sitting dully there before her, that he loved her. There was something final in his love for her. He'd never get beyond it. It was a prison house of pain now. But a prison house he wouldn't leave for the license of the world wide. Yes, he loved her, and she was using his love for her as a scourge. When he asked her what he had done, when he reminded her that she had loved him once, she ignored the second observation to shriek hysterically, "What have you done? What have you done? Nothing. Absolutely nothing." Later on, the Jack Wheeler came down. Jack began explaining upon his entrance that he had forgot when he made the date that he was due at the mystic shrine. When he said it, he winked at Billy. Billy saw that he winked, but he was impervious to the meaning. Blanny went in to watch Laura dress, and Billy, who had known Jack a long time, blurted out the ache in his heart. Jack laughed. "That's a woman for you," he said. "All you need to do, old man, is to give her a dose of her own quinine. Play a game yourself. Flirt a bit. Keep her waiting nights. Let her discover a scented note or so. Be a devil of a fellow." Billy shook his solemn head. "I don't want any woman on terms like that, Jack," he said. "I want the real article or nothing." Jack gave a disgusted grunt and rose to go. "You'll get nothing, old man," he said. "This mystic shrine stunt of mine covers a multitude of sins. Nothing like it. Nighty, you and Blanny play cards like good kids, and I'll stop in for her on my return. If I return." With which cryptic utterance he departed. Half an hour later, Laura departed too. Billy felt that she had departed finally. At least, she would never come back any more to him. An end had come. He couldn't help talking to Blanny. He felt sorry for her, and he felt bitterly sorry for himself. He felt that he had not deserved this. He had been willing to give to his uttermost. Some small return should have been his. Blanny was there, and he talked to her. He didn't think of her as a woman, even as a person. He had got out of the habit of thinking of the opposite sex as women anyway, since Laura had cut like a flame into his gray days and burned all other interests into nothingness. He told Blanny about that, about how much he loved her, and how he had never loved before and never would again. He told her, whimsically, that he was that kind of a man. A one-woman man, he said, and repeated it. It had a high sound to it. He said that Laura was different. She was like a kaleidoscope. She shifted, he said. It should make him love her less, he knew, but it didn't. It had, alas, the opposite effect. He loved her now, at this moment, to desperation. He got on to the subject of death as an alleviation. After a while, Blanny broke in on him softly. She had like woes. Jack stayed out so much, seemed to like to stay out. There was one poignantly unforgettable occasion, the night he had stayed out first. She had cried herself to sleep. She had grown old that very particular night. Things were all wrong. The world was unfair. Love was a snare and a delusion. Men were not to be trusted, she added timidly, some men. But Billy did not register the soft apology. He was only catching 1 word in 10 anyway. His mind was with Laura at the opera and Philip at her side. Philip, who should not dare to touch the hem of her garment. Philip, who had cared so much. He did get the fact, though, that Blanny was sympathetic. She was pouring the fragrant oil of her sympathies upon his more than troubled waters. He began to feel a bit warmer. The raw edges of the just inflicted wound did not smart quite so violently. He looked at Blanny. She was little and soft, and, he decided with a gleam of treachery, appealing. Not radiant like Laura, of course, not vital and compelling. A sweet little thing, a balm. Billy's own hurt goaded him. It was not fair for this little soft thing to be deceived by mystic shrines and such like claptrap. Was there no chivalry? Still, what did chivalry get one? Mortal wounds and pain that rusted away one's sensibilities. He blurted out to Blanny that there was no mystic shrine. He took a vicarious pleasure in the pain that stabbed into her eyes. He was not able to supply what there was in place of the toppled shrine. Blanny's imagination did that. Outrage entered her appalled mind. She declaimed against Laura and Jack, singly and in doubles. She declaimed amazingly for a soft, small person. It came to Billy that once Kipling had versified about the female of the species. Kipling, he concluded, had the right idea. It resulted after several twin diatribes upon what to do. Billy thought that going to the devil might be good. Blanny thought so too. She inquired the most direct route to the devil. Billy thought drink. It had a motivating power, he had heard. Blanny said that she didn't keep any drinks in her apartment. Her mother had brought her up differently. Billy said that his mother had had the same idea. Made it sort of clubby, didn't it? But that Laura insisted upon the requisite stuff for cocktails and a moet or two. There was enough on hand, he felt sure, for a short-cut to the nether regions. The rest of the material was surprisingly handy. He was the other man. She was the other woman. Blanny said it was all awful, but her heart was broken, and she would show Jack Wheeler. Billy said his heart was broken, and he would show Laura Bartlett. Forthwith he produced a laden tea-cart, containing ingredients enough for various satanic round trips. Blanny regarded it with pigeon toes and awe. It had a fearful aspect. Billy regarded it, and bade farewell to the vanished might-have-been. He had had ideals. Tonight he would drown them. He would drink, and there was another woman right to his hand. He would do his worst, his damnedest. He mixed the drinks. He knew one did something vague called mixing the drinks, and he mixed. Oh, he mixed. Laura thought he had mixed when she had sipped the first half of the first round. Going to the devil was rather a noxious proceeding, she thought, with the first sip. But after the first sip, one didn't seem to mind so much. After several, one didn't mind at all. One didn't know at all what one was doing. Blanny thought that Billy was being awfully silly. He played the pianola, and they danced. Blenny knew that she had never danced in such a wise before. Then Billy had an affectionate gust. She felt affectionate. Broken hearts. They talked quite a great deal about broken hearts. Billy said he was bleeding to death. She kissed him, and then he said that he wasn't. Billy talked about love. He said he was getting a new perspective. Blanny didn't know that he said that because his enunciation was suffering en route to the devil. Still later, hours, eons, eternities, she felt, were slithering by. Still later, sleep attacked them both. Something told them that sleep under the circumstances would never do. They would have to be doing something livelier than sleep. The devil was never like that. They mixed more rounds. Things were very round indeed. When things were roundest, the door opened, and Laura stepped into the room. Back of her was Jack Wheeler. Philip Evans was back of him. There was, from the three spectators, an abysmal silence. From Billy there was a series of hiccups, painful in the extreme. Also, his eyes rolled about like marbles on a slippery floor. He had the attitude of a flounder cast ashore after a very wet session. From Blanny there was inarticulateness and a flow of wet and very sloppy tears. Her husband gathered, too, the brimstone fact that she and Billy Boy, had arrived with expedition at the devil, that it was nice at the devil, that she thought she would stay at the devil for ever and ever, amen. Only Jack could gather the information from the strange sounds, but then Jack knew his Blanny, or had so thought. Laura tore her hair. She told Philip to go away from the scene of her final disgrace. She said that she would spend the rest of the night packing, and that, if need be, she would hail a policeman to save her from that creature. She said acidly, but it was all lost on Billy, happy Billy, floating in his alcoholic mist, that the divorce proceedings would be begun bright and early this a.m. Jack tore what of Blanny's hair he could get his furious fingers into. Blanny told him a mystic shrine had toppled. Jack told her that she had toppled along with the shrine, and there was nothing mystic about it either. He informed Billy, relapsing into Morpheus, that he had better gibber to God instead of the devil, because he was destined to meet him in the morning. He, Jack, would return when he had dealt with Blanny and assist him on his way. He departed, with Blanny still gurgling under his arms. Laura spent the remainder of the night dragging suitcases about and giving Billy pieces of her mind, which he never received, being noisily somnambulant. It was odd for Laura to talk to an adamantine Billy. It aroused in her a faint curiosity. It invested Billy with a sort of dignity, a withdrawal, a reserve. Laura felt piqued. Even, she thought, in his cups, the wretch he had not ought to be impervious to her presence. What was that he had told her about being earth in an earthy bed? That he still would see her and hear her, and his heart, what was it? Would blossom in flowers of purple and red. Had he been deceiving her all along? He and that baby doll Blanny? Two of a kind, certainly. Had they been playing a single game, cleverly, going just last night a bit beyond the limits? Was that it? Had Billy never been hers? Oh, men! Early in the morning, Laura went out. She wanted to phone Philip Evans that she would not meet him for luncheon. She didn't know why she wouldn't, but she felt that she didn't want to leave until she left for good, while that Blanny person was around. When she returned, the furniture movers were in the hall. She had notified them the day before, when, under Philip's whirlwind ardor, she had decided about the divorce and the immediate breakup. Perhaps they would frighten Billy, the imminence of the furniture movers. It did. He reared up in bed and implored Laura for more time. He said it was undignified of her. It was literally imposing the take up thy bed and walk. It was an outrage from the Dark Ages. It was extreme humiliation. The furniture movers shifted noisily. Laura reminded him that humiliation was his middle name. Something stirred beneath the bed, and the furniture mover yowled. Billy groaned and dropped back. Laura glared at him, and then transferred her glare to the spot at which the furniture mover was staring. Blanny's head protruded like the head of a turtle from its shell just below the footboard of the bed. "I came down for," began Blanny, crawling out. "I didn't know you were out, Laura. I came for—" "I hope you got what you came for," screamed Laura. Oh, this is outrageous. This is perfidy. This is, oh, what isn't it? Will someone tell me?" "'Tisn't decent, Mum," vouchsafed one of the movers readily. "That's what it isn't." "I know what it is, Mum," vouchsafed a second. "My missus has the same habits, Mum. Orful, that's what I calls it." Laura moaned again. "To think I trusted you," she kept saying. "You of the race of man. While all the time, oh, take me home to Mother." Blanny vanished into the bathroom beyond. It was all too much for her. There was no mystic shrine, she remembered that. She felt that she hated Billy for telling her so. It had caused all the trouble. It was just like the time a big boy had told her that there was no Santa Claus. It had hurt her in the same way. She had never enjoyed her Christmas any more after that. Now she could never enjoy her husband any more. Hysteria was rising rapidly when the maid came to the foreground and said she had not been axed, but what with all the goings-on, she felt she oughter tell that Mr. Bartlett, bless him, was innocent as a lamb, and the young lady from apartment 66 had just come inquiring for her man. All the fuss was for nothing if she was axed, which she wasn't, and so could she be excused. Jack, hard upon her heels, overheard, and was grandiloquently forgiving. He felt that he had to atone for the shrine. He even told Blanny, between kisses, that the shrine was merely a name for jackpots, and he had used it to save her feelings, which were delicate, and her principles, which were Methodistic, and hence anti-poker. He added that she was his baby-waby, itty-bitty, tootsie-wootsy, and he'd get her spiffed himself some night, yes he would, and to come home to Papa and not be naughty any more. Jack also hissed in Billy's ear to take a bracer, not the kind he had had in the night, but a mental bracer, to get a little backbone where his wishbone had been, and to tell Laura to go as far as she liked, and then some, and that if she wanted a divorce he'd not only let her have it, but go and get it for her, that there were as good fish, etc., ad nauseam. Billy thought it was good dope. Going to the devil had not been without its due effect. There was a stimulus, removing this morning after tragedy. Also there was the kiss Blanny had given him just before his complete immersion. Rather sweet, and ummy and all that. Other fish, well. Of course he loved Laura. He knew that right enough. There could never be another Laura. But he had cut his eye teeth, and he wasn't going to drool about any longer. He was going to bite. At high noon, Laura came in to him, and he didn't give her her customary first word. He sat erect and rampaged his hair and looked fierce and devil-may-care, and told her that she needn't trouble about the divorce, that he would get it himself, and be damn glad to, and that he guessed that would be about all. A fare thee well, he said. He wished her luck. Laura began to weep. A little shaft of light lit up her understanding. Life suddenly presented itself to her without any Billy anywhere at all. And lo, life grinned at her with fleshless force. She remembered their honeymoon, and something gripped her throat. She remembered the plans they had made, and the dreams they had dreamed. She remembered last night, and Philip Evans, slipping a note to a chorus girl at the table next theirs. She remembered the song she had heard, Love Comes But Once. She stumbled over to him and got down on her knees. She was desperately homesick. "Oh, Bill," she sobbed. "Oh, Bill, can you love a fool? Can you love a fool?" Bill gathered her in his arms. "Does the fool love me?" he wanted to know. "Oh, does she?" came from his shoulder. "Oh, does she? Oh, Bill." End of section 13.
Section 14 of Shadowland, November 1919. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Wayne Cooke. Shadowland, November 1919, by Various. The Court of the Sage. Patience is a virtue. Try and read this department through. It is dull here and there, I admit, but still it sparkles now and then. Don't skip anything. Many a gem is passed by in the mines because it does not glitter. All is not good that is written. Sometimes it is rotten. I can't shine all the time. Even the moon can't do that, but I shall trim my little lamp and set it in the window. Were the ancients wiser than the moderns? That is a question which has never quite been settled, so let's settle it. The ancients were certainly greater in some things, and we are certainly greater in many things. Nobody will dispute this, I ween, hence the question is settled. But this is a matter for a catalogue, not a paragraph. Certain it is that more is required in our time to make a wise man than was formerly required to make several sages. The ancients had their orators, but they had not our phonographs. They had their pictures, but had not our motion pictures. They had their vessels, but they had not our steamships. They had their lyres, but they had not our organs, orchestras, and pianos. They had their messages, but they had not our telegraph, telephone, and wireless to deliver them with. They had their books and libraries, but they had not our libraries, encyclopedias, and magazines in every home. They had their Socrates, but have we not 1,000 educators where Greece had 10? And education today is quite different than it was when most of our present sciences were unknown. In ancient times 'twas all the rage for each rich man to keep a sage. In Middle Ages 'twas the rule for men of wealth to keep a fool. But with myself and Fatty's fame, you've sage and fool to entertain. Yes, I suppose Mary Pickford will be retiring in a few years, and that by that time there will be a worthy successor. While there is nobody yet in sight, there is a possibility that Blanche McGarrity, winner of the Fame and Fortune contest, will be wearing little Mary's shoes. Soon the advance agents will be heralding Blanche's first appearance. But you cannot make a star in a month, nor within a year. Rome was not built in a day. Miss Lucy Walton is informed that Ruth St. Denis has not appeared on the screen, but her dancers have. Elsie Ferguson can be reached at Famous Players Company, 485 Fifth Avenue, New York. Nazimova's address is Metro Studio, 3 West 61st Street, New York City. Bert Lytell has brown hair, hazel eyes, height 5 feet 10.5 inches, and weighs 155 pounds. As to whether he is married or not, ask him. My apologies are due Donald Coney for calling a nonsense quatrain a limerick, but does not Rose by any other name swell just as sweet? Big brains do not always grow in big bodies. Some of our greatest men were little men. Among the little warriors were Napoleon, Charlemagne, Hannibal, Caesar, Wellington, William of Orange, Earl Roberts, Dewey, Nelson Sheridan, Joe Wheeler, Alexander the Great, and Frederick the Great. Among the little statesmen were Hamilton, Tilden, McKinley, Burr, Harrison, Douglas, and Seward. Among the little authors were Shakespeare, Pope, Balzac, Holmes, Kipling, Keats, and Voltaire. Among the little musicians were Wagner, Mozart, Chopin, Beethoven, Rubinstein, Schubert, Liszt, Paderewski, Haydn, and Weber. Furthermore, it is not always the big men who march in the procession. The big men who mold and change the thought of the world are often those who are never seen or heard. Everything everywhere is beautiful. If it does not appear so, there is dust on the mental optics. Yes, friend Socrates, the world is full of unrest and discontent. Strikes and walkouts are the order of the day. Everybody wants shorter hours and more pay. What a blessing to humanity that horses, cows, and chickens can't think and talk. If they could, they would be holding seditious mass meetings, forming labor unions, proclaiming liberty, fraternity, equality, and threatening to revolt against a slavery which is even worse than that which existed before the Civil War. But thank the Lord, the chickens go on laying, bless their hearts, and the horses continue to lessen our toil, and cows continue to supply our breakfast tables without a murmur. A young gentleman from Milwaukee says he doesn't like my department and can see nothing in it. Perhaps he experiences a similar emotion when he looks in the mirror. When a person says he sees nothing in a book, he very often means that he doesn't see himself in it, which, if it be not a comedy or a satire, is quite likely. I'm sorry I can't please all my readers. Anyway, I shall do my darndest. The trouble with you is, Jonathan, that you are a specialist and live in a shell. Specialists should remember that man is a combination of brain, heart, imagination, taste, nerves, bone, and muscle. It is right to bend every energy to become proficient in one thing, but every man requires variety of occupation and variety of discipline. It might not be a bad idea for the preacher and the carpenter, the musician and the woodchopper, to change places once in a while. The carpenter may preach a very bad sermon, but it would make him a better carpenter. Strive not to realize the ideal, but to idealize the real. All men do not see alike. All men do not hear alike. All men do not think alike. All eyes, ears, and brains are different, and nature made them so. Nature, like Shakespeare, never repeats. Therefore, my perverse brother, when your opinions differ with mine, I am as confident that you are wrong as you are that I am. But, nevertheless, I won't forget that your eyes, ears, and brains are different from mine, and that the good Lord may have given you a better set. With hats that prevent them from sitting up straight, and high heels that prevent them from walking straight, and weighted skirts that prevent their lines being straight, and corsets that prevent their internal organs keeping straight, and curling irons to prevent their hair being straight, prohibition to keep their morals straight, and the ballot to keep men straight, woman, bless her heart, should now be quite happy. Rebel Mitchell of Isle of Palm, South Carolina, is informed that I am not from Chicago, nor from Boston. I live in Brooklyn, when I'm home. No, Miss J.M.K. of 1438 3rd Street, Milwaukee. Jack Kerrigan is not married, to the best of my knowledge and belief, as the lawyers say, nor is Eugene O'Brien the imperfect lover. I know nothing of 7% TMER and Z bonds. If you will send me some, I will try and let you know if they are safe. As for how long is a plate of spaghetti, and what becomes of the wool in the hole in a sock, I leave for the jokesmiths. I have more serious matters before the house. I don't see how I can advise you, Dr. W.T.L., about what kinds of clothes to wear. Every man should be well dressed and should keep one eye on the fashions, but only fops and dudes become slave of fashion. Above all, wear good clothes, have them fit well, and don't have them cut or colored so that they attract attention. Clothes don't make the man, but they make the impression. Children judge a man by what he is. Women judge him from what he says. Philosophers from what he thinks. Society from what he wears. The world from what he makes. It is pretty generally conceded that the same weight of undergarment should be worn winter and summer, the difference to be made up with outer garments which are removed when entering a warm room. The old notion that there is warmth in red flannel, wool, or in any other material is a fallacy, for there is no more warmth in these than in tin. We must consider ourselves as moist, warm bodies surrounded by a cooler atmosphere, and the question is, how can we keep in, hold, or retain this warmth? Our bodies are furnaces. We take in fuel, food, and the fire it creates gives off heat which we must imprison. Therefore, we must consider whether wool, cotton, silk, or linen, etc., will best act as a fender and prevent our own heat from getting away too freely. We lose heat in 4 ways: radiation, evaporation, conduction, and convection. It is by radiation that a hot body heats a cold one at a distance. It is by evaporation that a liquid is changed to a gas and, in so doing, extracts heat from the surface on which it lies. It is by conduction that heat travels quickly along a poker when one end is put in the fire. It is by convection that liquids and gases are heated, and air heated by our bodies, being lighter than cold air, ascends. Hence, a person lying down will freeze quicker than one standing. If we should wrap our bodies in tin or iron or the like, we should freeze from loss of heat by conduction. If we should cover our bodies with wet garments, we should freeze from loss of heat by evaporation plus conduction. Iron, tin, and water are good conductors of heat. Furred animals cannot live long after the fur has been removed and their skins varnished. They would freeze to death in a warm room, for varnish is a good conductor of heat. And likewise with a shorn animal, plated with tin, if we can imagine such. The poorest conductor of heat is dry air, and that is the condition we must seek in selecting underwear. The garment that will keep the skin dry and that will not conduct heat away too freely is the one we should select, particularly if it also has the faculty of preserving a layer of dry air next to the skin. Wool is a poor conductor and therefore makes a good undergarment, except that it does not absorb moisture quickly and dries very slowly and is difficult to wash thoroughly. Try to dry your face with woolen and see. The body is constantly giving off poisonous moisture. Wool clothes collects and preserves it, and when wool is damp it becomes a good conductor of heat and therefore makes a poor undergarment. Linen is a good absorbent and dries very quickly. Linen handkerchiefs and towels are in common use because they absorb and dry quickly and are easily washed. The best undergarments are probably those made of porous linen. They keep the skin comparatively dry, and the numerous cells in the material form a layer of dry air which, next to a vacuum, makes the best non-conductor of heat known to science. There are numerous brands of garments on the market known as linen mesh, and all are excellent. Some of these contain pores or holes as large or larger than pinheads, and resemble thick mosquito netting. Yet this sort of underclothing has more warmth, or rather retains more warmth, than the thickest woolens. Many will not believe this until they try it, and even then an imaginary chill or a first feeling of coolness often convinces them to the contrary. 2 suits of underwear, the inner of linen and the outer of wool or silk, appears to be scientifically sound, for this system has the double advantage of avoiding moisture, thereby retaining the body heat, and of creating a layer of dry air between the garments. Most persons will find, however, that linen underwear and woolen outerwear answers every purpose. There never was a long happiness. There must be calms between the storms. There must be tears between smiles. Fortune generally pays us for the intensity of her favors by the shortness of their duration. We would never learn fully to appreciate the sunshine if we did not often have the clouds. They say that poor old blind Homer died of chagrin because he couldn't expound a riddle propounded by a simple fisherman. Leaving what is taken, what we took not we bring. Poor Homer. No wonder he died. Aristotle and Philetus were also painfully perplexed by the famous sophism called by the ancients the liar. If you say of yourself, I lie, and in so saying tell the truth, you lie. If you say, I lie, and in so saying tell a lie, you tell the truth. Think it over. I guess the poet was right when he said, sweet are the uses of adversity. But I am inclined to think that the uses of prosperity are sweeter. I cannot be sure, but I am led to believe that a large majority of the criticisms of picture plays that appear in the magazines, newspapers, and periodicals are written for pay or through influence. All producers, players, and directors have friends at court, and if they haven't any, they know that money will generally buy what friendship does not supply. I believe, however, that the motion picture magazine and classic have never yet been accused of favoritism, and I know that money cannot buy favor in any of the publications of the MP Publishing Company. It is rather a strange fact that actors are seldom orators or even good speakers, and it is equally curious, as Hazlitt says, that authors are seldom good conversationalists. Actors should be seen and heard at a distance, speaking lines that have been made for them. Authors should be read and not heard. Descartes, La Fontaine, Buffon, Marmont, and Corneille of France, and Milton, Dryden, Butler, Addison, and Goldsmith of England are among the most noted examples of fine pens and poor tongues. Charles II, the wittiest of English monarchs, was so tickled with Hudibras that he caused himself to be introduced, in the character of a private gentleman, to Butler, the supposedly witty author. But after the first interview, the king was quite sure that such a stupid fellow could never have written such a clever book. On the other hand, Steele, Swift, Pope, Congreve, Coleridge, Burns, Galt, and Scott possessed literary and conversational powers of the highest order. The producers of some of our lurid yellow melodramas defend themselves by saying they are holding a mirror up to nature. Perhaps, but it seems to be a dirty mirror. An actress is much like a clock, which may have a pretty face, but whose value depends upon its works. Several readers tell me that they like my little paragraphs in large type, while others have told me that it spoils the look of the page. A proverb is said to be the experience of many and the wit of one, and it might be added that an epigrammist is one who sees much and writes little, or writes it in few words. When I succeed in saying a whole lot in a few words, I swell out my chest and smile approvingly at my terminal facilities. Life is short, and so is this department. Hence, I shall avoid long articles as much as possible, and try to put up potted wisdom in small packages, but in large type, that he who runs may read. One of the wisest of my readers says that she would like to see Broken Blossoms in a plain theater, with ordinary music and without any special lighting effects and colored scenes. She says that a great deal of this beautiful play is due to camouflage and stage effects. She adds that she would like to see the villain knocked out in the prize fight, for the reason that otherwise he is made a brave man, and that a brave man could not brutally beat a harmless, helpless child. Again, she insists that the hero and the heroine should not have been killed in the last act, that there was no necessity of killing everybody off and leaving a bad flavor in the mouth for a week afterwards. all of which gives food for thought. It is easier to talk like a philosopher than to live like one, just as it is easier to preach what you don't practice and to practice what you don't preach. Courtesy is a passport that admits and passes you everywhere. It is a stepbrother to tact and diplomacy. Courtesy is the art of being agreeable. Tact is the science of knowing how to get what you want and don't deserve from a bigger man without getting hurt. Diplomacy is skillful deception that enables one nation to fool another without treading on its corns, or in other words, lying in state. Courtesy is the password that admits you to the house of success. Rich is he whose wealth satisfies his wants, though he lives in a hovel. Poor is he whose wealth does not satisfy his wants, though he live in a palace. We are rich or poor in what we want, not in what we have. Adam owned the earth once and wasn't satisfied. Who seeks a new path may get lost, but someone will find the path, and it may become a road. When the Christian scientists and the New Thoughtists say that pain is unnecessary because it is a product of the mind, they fall into a conspicuous error. What is happiness but the intermission of pain? What is pleasure but the enjoying of that, the deprivation of which would give sorrow? Man in his normal state is happy, and when he is deprived of good health or of that which he wants, he suffers pain. When he is not in pain, he is completely happy. When he is completely happy, he is not in pain. A child suffers just as much as a man, proportionately, when it is deprived of a toy that it wants, and that deprivation causes as much pain to it as would the deprivation of a kingdom to a man. But give the child its toy, and the man his kingdom, and they are at once happy again. The only way to reconcile new thought with this is to assume that the brain is to become so distorted as not to recognize the absence of wished-for things. If we can so blind the mind that it will refuse to see all that is disagreeable, and so that it can forget pleasures past and not seek pleasures future, then, perhaps, can mind prevent pain. Give to your friends consideration, to your enemies toleration, to yourself moderation, to your creditors remuneration, to your aggrieved restoration, to your benefactors commendation, to your father emulation, to your mother adoration, to all men commiseration. Make use of your friends not by using them, but by being of use to them. I am asked if I believe in higher wages. Certainly, because wages should rise in proportion to the rise in the cost of living, although they do not do so as rapidly. Many employers do not raise wages because they can't raise the money. Should women get men's wages? Bless your heart, yes. But don't they get them already? J.A.B. asks, can you give any information about Mrs. Grundy, who is so often referred to as a most censorious person? Mrs. Grundy is a mythical sort of person whose opinions on social topics are deemed of such importance that with anything unusual happens in society, the question is at once asked, what will Mrs. Grundy say? There is a reference to Mrs. Grundy in one of the popular comedies originally produced as far back as the year 1798. In the play, a farmer's wife, who is jealous of the good fortune of her near neighbors, the Grundys, says to her husband, "If our Nellie were to marry a baronet, I wonder what Mrs. Grundy would say." It has also been said that the use of the phrase became popular when Felix Grundy, a member of the House of Representatives and a United States Senator, appeared in Washington with his wife, who became a leader of the social set, and whose opinions naturally carried great weight. Hence rose the comment on any particular occurrence of, "What will Mrs. Grundy say?" End of section 14.
Section 15 of Shadowland, November 1919. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. To a Movie Made, read by MFQ1. To a Movie Made. O glitter of diamond and moonshine of pearl, O hangings of velvet and incense of wealth, wherefore are the days of the larkspur and song, of the birds singing blithely, of springtide and health? O proud, haughty blooms floral, patrician, O motor-lined mart and velvet-laid pave, wherefore are the meadows, sweet-yielding their wild bloom, and the road open clean to the skies that I crave? O fair hothouse women and jewel-bright wines, O faintness of perfume and wraiths of regret, wherefore is the nectar of milk and of honey, and the sweet free-limbed maid that I cannot forget? Gladys Hall. End of section 15.
Section 16 of Shadowland, November 1919. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. I Might Not, If I Could, by the Christian Scientist, read by Stacey M. I might not, if I could. I should not, if I might. Yet, if I should, I would. And shoulding, I should quite. I must not, yet I may. I can, and still I must. But I cannot, nay. To must I may not, just. I shall, although I will. But be it understood, if I may, can, shall, still, I might, could, would, or should. End of section 16.
Section 17 of Shadowland, November 1919. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Martyrdom of the Pen. It is pleasant to be looked upon as a great writer, but it is usually more profitable to be almost anything else. The way of the transcriber is hard. That wicked old Dame Fortune seems to frown on the writers until after they are dead, and then she usually smiles sweetly and strews their graves with flowers. Just recall and see if this is not true. Beginning with Chaucer, did he not exchange a palace for a prison? And was not Spenser's banished to Ireland to die in poverty? Then there was Bacon, who sold his ermine to find favour with the eminent, and then was called to the bar of the House of Lords to be degraded and disgraced. Then there was that slovenly, intemperate, ungracious, but delightful parasite, good old Ben Jonson, who failed as an actor, and who called one day at a nobleman's door and was asked for his card. Stating that he had no card, he bounced in, and upon being asked who he was, blurted, "I am Ben Jonson." "Ben Jonson? You don't look as if you could say boo to a goose." "Boo," said Jonson. "Sit down," was the response. "You are Ben Jonson." The poor bard died as he had lived, in poverty. Hooker's fate was even worse, for he married a clownish Xantippe. Bishop Taylor was imprisoned. The author of Hudibras, Butler, who has delighted millions besides me, died in squalid lodgings without money enough to bury him. Dryden ended his industrious life in almost equal poverty. Clarendon, pure, moderate, and economical among extremists, died in exile, Milton had 2 misfortunes, both great. He married unfortunately and was stricken blind. Bunyan spent only about 12 years in prison, but then he was a bad boy, profligate and wicked. Swift, selfish, heartless, and unloving, yet of splendid talent, died as he had predicted, like a tree struck by lightning at the top, or like a poisoned rat in a hole. Poor, gentle Addison had a double misfortune. He married unhappily and died in Champagne. Surly Dr. Johnson, awkward and ungainly, suffered with scrofula, was mad half his life, and died one of the lowest grubs in Grub Street. Sterne, a bad husband and a bad priest, neglected his mother and died in dissipation. Goldsmith, chased by bailiffs and fears, died in poverty, deserted by all but the poor charwoman to whom he had been kind. Defoe was a cripple, wrote 210 works, and then was imprisoned for writing in favour of freedom. Fielding, though of noble ancestry, led a dissipated, irregular life, and wrote starving in a garret. Smollett, poor and friendless, raw, bitter, uncouth, and ill-tempered, was several times fined and imprisoned, and died at 33. Chatterton, son of a grave-digger, but of marvellous talent, was poverty-stricken, and poisoned himself at 18. Timid Cooper, very poor, and tinged with madness, gave the immortal tasks to his publishers free. From literary England we could go to other countries and see similar examples of literary misfortune, as for example to Italy, where Dante was exiled, or to Spain, where Cervantes was jailed. But let this suffice. Shakespeare was right. The world is but a stage. End of section 17. Read by Robert Connaughton, Brisbane, 25th September 2024.
Section 18 of Shadowland, November 1919. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Shadowland, November 1919, by Various. Come, cheer up, old folks. There's plenty of time for you to do things unless you are over 100. Some people seem to think that the big things of this world are always accomplished by the young people. This is not so. However, some people grow old at 40, while others are still young at 60. Men are different. Some blossom and bloom in youth and wither and decay in middle age. Some are imbeciles in boyhood and youth and intellectual giants in old age. Some are bright in the spring, summer, autumn, and winter of their lives, and some are not bright ever. On the whole, it is safe to say that the world's best thoughts, works, and deeds have come from men who were middle-aged or over. Mozart, Beethoven, John Fiske, Coleridge, Bryant, Elizabeth Browning, Mrs. Hemans, Raphael, Chatterton, John Stuart Mill, Macaulay, Pascal, Tasso, Bulwer Lytton, Shelley, Eupolis, Cicero, Octavius, Pliny the Younger, Alexander, William Wotton, and Newton were all extremely precocious. Some of the best works of Byron, Pope, Collins, Congreve, and Sheridan were produced before the authors were 26 or 27. Joan of Arc accomplished all her wonderful feats at 18, and Alexander died at 32. Bryant wrote Thanatopsis at 18, but his greatest work was done at 77, and even at 84 he was still writing. Newton had accomplished most of his best work at 45 and conceived much of it at 24, though he lived to be 85. Swift wrote The Tale of a Tub at 30, but lived to the age of 72. Cowper was 50 when his first work was published. Lord Bacon's essays were written at 35, but his greatest work came at 60. Dryden's best odes came at 70, and Chaucer was about the same age when the Canterbury Tales came out. Shakespeare's younger works were of course fine, but his best came with his riper years. Milton turned out some great works before he was 30, but the immortal Paradise Lost came at 57. Burke's best, his Reflections, were produced at 60. At 10, a child, at 20, wild, at 30, tame if ever, at 40, wise, at 50, rich, at 60, great, or never. Sophocles, Pindar, Anacreon, and Xenophon were octogenarians. Kant, Buffon, Goethe, Fontenelle, and Newton were over 80 when they died. Michelangelo died at 89, Titan 99, Harvey 80, and still busy. Landor wrote Imaginary Conversations at 85. Isaac Walton was writing at 90, and so was Hahnemann at 91 and married at 80. Cornaro was in better health at 95 than at 30, and Debalsey was still practicing medicine at 103. Demosthenes was at his best at 54, Aristotle at 50, and Plato after he was 55, and did not die until 82. Spinoza, Stern, Mommsen, Pasteur, Mohammed, Wren, Leonardo da Vinci, Cromwell, and Cervantes did their best work after 40, and Scott never wrote a word until he was over 40. Adam lived 930 years, Seth 913, Enos 905, Noah 950, Canaan 910, Mahalalel 895, Jared 962, and Methuselah 969. Haller has noted 1,000 cases of centenarians, 62 from 100 to 120 years, 29 from 120 to 130, and 15 from 130 to 140 years. St. Patrick died at 122, Attila at 124. In Russia alone, in 1828, there were 828 centenarians in the empire, of whom 40 had exceeded 120. In 1830, according to the census reports, there were 2,556 persons in our own country 100 or over, and in 1850, nearly the same number. Old wood to burn, old books to read, old wine to drink, and old friends to converse with, said Alfonso of Castile. Young blood for energy, enthusiasm, and vigor, old blood for good sense, judgment, wisdom, prudence, balance, and sagacity, and somewhere between the two, a happy union of all. The Octogenarian. End of section 18.
Section 19 of Shadowland, November 1919. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Shadowland, November 1919, by Various. Shadowland Classics. The man who fears to take his stand alone, who follows where the greatest number tread, should hasten to his rest beneath the stone. The great majority of men are dead. We lately unearthed a poem which, for reasons unknown, has until now escaped classic honours. It was written by Lord Nassau in 1560 blank. It first appeared in the blank about the time of the reign of blank in Ireland. Stand a little back, reader, here it comes. For years upon a mountain's brow a hermit lived, the Lord knows how. Plain was his dress, and coarse his fare. He got his food, the Lord knows where. His prayers were short, his wants were few. He had a friend, the Lord Nazu. No care nor trouble vexed his lot. He had a wish, the Lord knows what. At length this holy man did die. He left the world, the Lord knows why. He's buried in a gloomy den, and he shall rise, the Lord knows when. The Bookworm. Patience is a virtue. Try and read this magazine through. Rather dull here and there, we admit, but it sparkles now and then. Don't skip anything. Many a gem is passed by in the mines because it doesn't glitter. We cannot shine all the time. Even the moon can't do that. But we shall trim our lamp and set it in the window. Read one page, don't skip a word. Now read another, then a third. Digest it, 'twill do you good. They laugh where laughing's understood. Should you by laughing thus grow fat, I will make no extra charge for that. He cannot be complete in art who is not humorously prone. A man without a merry thought can hardly have a funny bone. End of section 19. End of Shadowland, November 1919, by Various.